Chapter 946. Although there are some subtle mistakes in your understanding, it's understandable that you don't know. After all, apart from the road of Heaven's Inquisition that she created herself, Tangi doesn't care about these things. After listening to Huaishi's answer, Russell shook his head. Besides, after the fall of heaven, Utopia split up. Together with the celestial genealogy, it's still called the Abyss genealogy. Who knows how much information and records are missing? The traders of Golden Dawn even used the authority of the Land of Dreams to erase many records from the Silver Sea before they rebelled. In the elevator, he pinched his chin and pondered for a moment. Suddenly, he nodded. Then, before we get down to business, let's have a basic lesson. It was only now that Huaishi realized that he had been tricked into a pirate ship again. However, the elevator had already begun to sink. There was no way to escape. Russell stretched out his hand and wrote in the air. His handwriting was smooth. Then, let's start from the beginning. Apart from the branches that are now widely known, celestial genealogy actually had a total of 9 paths of sublimation at the beginning. Or rather, this was the plan: dusk, eternity, heaven's inquisition, spirit quintessence, maintenance, change, primordial, paradise, and a hidden path that no one knows except for the president and the official clerk of fate. Unfortunately, at the end of Utopia, the final road of paradise was not completed. There was only a prototype, so it was not universal and could only be said to be half completed. In the end, only 8.5 paths were completed. Wait, forget that the numbers are different. Did you just eat a book again? Huaishi keenly noticed the conflicting settings. Which half is the road of paradise? Isn't it Heaven's Inquisition? The elevator suddenly fell silent. Russell looked at him in shock, puzzled. Are you kidding, Huaishi? He said. The road of Heaven's Inquisition was personally presided over and was in charge of by Tangi. It was one of the first few paths completed by celestial genealogy. How could it be incomplete? Oh, she must have lied to you again, right? Then it's fine. Huaishi's face flushed red. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Although Tangi often lied to others, he did not feel that Tangi had lied about this matter. This was because an even worse conjecture had appeared in his mind. Could it be that the other half of his body was also remade by Tongji after she woke up? That black-hearted woman had been using the deluxe version to fool him. But in fact, the divine skill he was practicing was actually Heaven's Inquisition Road Gold Collection Full DLC Adaptation V2. 0-inch? That's F*King ridiculous. Cough, cough. Anyway, let's not talk about these unimportant things. Russell coughed twice, pretending as if nothing had happened, and said again, excluding the secret path and the path to paradise, which cannot be promoted and spread, and can only be placed in a safe. Then there are the 7 paths of sublimation during the heyday of the heavenly state genealogy. His fingers swept through the air, and as he spoke, a series of notes appeared in front of Huaishi's eyes. Heaven's Inquisition, eternity, dusk, divine marrow, maintenance, change, origin, cycle. Then, each path of the celestial genealogy sprouted rapidly and grew like a book, giving birth to symbols that represented the stigmata one after another. Starting from you, the Heaven's Inquisition path originated from the Dongsha genealogy. It has the sun god and moon god like Dongjun and Chang'e. Its core is adaptation and balance. It focuses on the transformation and control of the hell environment. Next is the eternal path originated from the Egyptian genealogy. Osiris the dead and Horus the Sky Lord. Compared to the original genealogy, they focus on the field of destruction. At the same time, they combine the research results of many scholars and alchemists. Whether it is the Osiris trial armor or Horus, the Sky Fortress, they're armed forces that can determine the outcome of the Abyss War. Then, it is the Dusk Path originated from Northern Europe. The core of it is strategy and control. How to control, use, and expand one's own army. The Divine Marrow Path originated from Greece. It is the direct research result of the Pillar of Divine Marrow. At the same time, it is also the path with the most divinity among the 7 paths of the celestial genealogy. It is the path that is most similar to the gods of the past. Because of this, it is almost the path with the worst compatibility with Isaac. At the mention of this, Russell could not help but shrug and complain in a low voice. He is definitely the kind that was delayed by his teacher. As if it was an illusion, Huaishur heard a cold snort vaguely coming from the void. However, when he listened carefully, it disappeared without a trace. The next 4 paths are even more unknown. At the same time, they're the 4 paths that suffered the most losses when the Utopia split. Russell sighed and said with his fingers, the maintenance path originated from the Indian genealogy. Now, only Krishna is left to support it. What's even more unbearable is that the core of this path is mystery. No matter how many successors there are, without the corresponding talent, it will be difficult for them to advance. They will not be of use. However, compared to the transformation path, the maintenance path is much better. The transformation path is completely opposite to the divine marrow path. Its core is human nature, good and evil. Because it is the greatest threat to those guys from the Golden Dawn. When the Utopia split, almost everyone who bore the brunt of it died. Kadia has been trying to reappear for so many years, but as you can see, the result is twice the effort for half the result. Moreover, her favorite daughter has just been beaten up by you and sent to the ICU. The chill in the air grew heavier and heavier, scaring Huaishur so much that he shivered. I didn't do it on purpose. Don't talk nonsense. Don't worry. I'm not blaming you. Russell glanced at him and shook his head. If the child loses outside, she will only sign the child up for a combat training class and let her find a chance to fight back. She won't lower herself to fight you. What are you afraid of? This is called my respect and admiration for my seniors. What do you know? Huaishur straightened his body and tried his best to act like a good young man. He only hoped that he would not be targeted by the influential big shots in the Russian Federation. After coughing twice, he brought the topic back to the topic. What about the primitive path? Huaishur asked. It sounds so majestic and domineering. It must be very powerful, but why haven't I come into contact with it? You want to come into contact with it? Russell looked at him with a faint smile. You will come into contact with it when you join the Golden Dawn. The primitive path originates from the Sumerian genealogy. It is the path closest to the essence of hell in celestial genealogy. The top of it is the oldest source of the Sumerian gods, the original Absu of the abyss, which represents chaos. Except for Perón, who changed his path, the others are now following the Golden Dawn and spreading their branches and leaves in hell. They are very prosperous. He excitedly suggested, why don't I arrange an undercover mission for you? You can go and understand it on our behalf. It can also be considered an achievement for you. No. Huaishur shook his head frantically. He was afraid that Russell would make an arrangement for him. If that happened, he would only be able to stab this old bastard in the back. It would not be good for teachers and students to fight each other. Russell did not continue this topic. Instead, he was silent for a long time and said calmly, the last one is the circulatory path that originates from the celestial genealogy. There is nothing much to talk about. Long before the fall of heaven, they voluntarily gave up the stigmata, laid the foundation of the silver ocean, and integrated into the infinite knowledge and wisdom of mankind. The last person who ascended the circulatory path was the previous president of the Astronomy Association. He also disappeared not long after the fall of heaven. The last light of Utopia left and did not return. Since then, Utopia's Astronomy Association has been officially revoked. Therefore, the circulatory path has long existed in name and is not included in the total. Huaishur fell silent. For a long time, he did not know if he should be grateful for the sacrifice of his ancestors or sad because Utopia's light had dimmed. When the once glorious ideal fell, all that was left was a fragmented reality. What's the hidden path? Huaishur asked. Russell did not answer, but his smile became stranger. Since you know it's hidden, why would I tell you? This is for your own good, Huaishur. Like hell I'll believe you. Huaishur rolled his eyes and could not be bothered to ask again. The elevator was still sinking. The speed was still accelerating. The two of them had been talking for so long. It had been almost 10 minutes, but the elevator still showed no signs of stopping. It was as if it wanted to bring them down endlessly. According to this speed, Huai Shi and the others were almost dozens of kilometers underground. The surrounding environment should be extremely hot and stuffy, but the elevator was still cool. We should be there in 2 minutes. Russell looked down at his watch. The underground fortification under the Dripping Blood Cathedral is a shelter built by the Russian Federation. At the same time, if I'm not wrong, it should also be the place where a holy coffin is buried, right? He smiled and reminded, the saint who inherited the authority of the god of nothingness is buried here. Remember not to touch or touch it later. Who knows how many bishops are watching us right now? Huai Shi felt a chill at the back of his head again. How did he end up in the heart of someone else's secret hinterland for no reason? If he took a wrong step and touched something, wouldn't the bishops above tear him apart alive? His reputation in the Russian Federation would probably be locked in hatred forever. Could it be that Russell, this old bastard, was still unwilling to give up and wanted to run away after stealing from their treasure vault? He quietly reached for his phone. He was ready to report it at any time. Don't worry, the body of the saint is nothingness. You can't touch it even if you want to. You can't see it even if it's placed in front of you. It will only appear when a new saint comes to accept the inheritance. Don't dream about it. Russell shook his head. The reason why we came here is because the thing we are looking for can only be suppressed by the holy coffin. Otherwise, the entire Ural region might become a hell on earth with a malignant germination. So evil. Huai Shi, what you're going to see next is the authoritative relic of the road of transformation. It is the Philosopher's Stone formed by the last 2 people who inherited the white god Belloberg and the black god Chernobyl. According to the information given to him by Catherine the Great, after experiencing the division of the Utopia and being attacked and slaughtered by their former brothers, the 2 ascendants who were finally buried left behind indescribable madness and resentment. In the end, what was formed was this authoritative relic that contained grief and anger. The mirror of day and night. Even under heavy seals and suppression, it had an irresistible corrosive power to the soul. It would interfere and distort all souls that tried to approach it, regardless of whether they were enemies or friends. Even if a rank 5 soul stayed near it for a long time, it might cause the soul to split. If one dared to look directly at it, they would fall into an inevitable madness. Their human nature would be distorted, their spirit would be shattered, and they would be torn apart by the opposing good and evil in their soul. But at the same time, it was the only inheritance of the road of transformation. Chapter 9:47. Apart from possessing the authority of a god and becoming an authoritative relic, the Day-Night realm was also a philosopher's stone left behind after the Ascendant had fallen. It preserved all the miracles and sacred marks of the path of transformation, as well as the complete power of the Black God and the White God. If a newly ascended person could pass the test of the secret ritual and obtain the origin substance, they would be qualified to once again step onto this severed path and inherit this power and hatred. This was the last ray of hope and turning point. Unfortunately, the more intelligent one is, the more difficult this test is. Russell sighed. The more intelligent one's mind is, the more ideas one has, the easier it is to fall into madness. Only fools and schemers can reach the end of this path. If you ask me, Katia is sometimes soft-hearted. No, I should say that she trusts her students too much, right? Completely disregarding the possibility that the person himself might be listening and gossiping behind someone else's back. He was beaming with joy. Even if she looks very serious and always unreasonable, in reality, as long as someone acts coquettishly, she is completely helpless with the child. Whether it's Isaac or Anna, it's the same. Isaac did it because of his longing for teacher, while Anna instinctively wanted to follow in her parents' footsteps. These are not rational decisions and should be stopped. He shrugged and sighed helplessly. Unfortunately, she always respects her students' choices too much. Huai Shi glanced at him. You should learn from her and respect me a little, okay? I won't. Russell's refusal was righteous, causing Huai Shi to grit his teeth in anger. For someone like you, Once you relax even a little, you'll definitely become a salted fish at the speed of light. In less than half a year, the Ivory Tower will be crowned this year's astronomy conference's Trash of the Year. Russell sighed with emotion. Teacher is doing this for your own good. I'm doing this for your own good. The child is still young. Fleischer glanced at Russell's neck, intending to fast forward to the next sentence. Everyone died. Unfortunately, the success rate was not high, so he could only regretfully give up. There was still plenty of time in the future. The Book of Destiny silently bore a grudge. With Russell's help and the information that Alexis told him, Fleischer finally understood. So, Anna became like this because something went wrong when she used it to advance? Yeah, Russell said. Everything was going well in the beginning, but at the end, she looked up at the mirror, or rather, when she had the thought of looking, she had already seen it. No one could stop him even if they wanted to. Didn't Catherine the Great tell her about the risks inside? Fleischer frowned. Why would you want to see it? Because in the mirror, you can see a temptation that you can't resist. Russell shook his head. Think about it. You are a talented and intelligent little girl. You have both parents, a happy family, and a promising future. Suddenly, one day, everything was gone. You only have yourself left. You have to inherit the hatred and pain they left behind and step on the path forward. At this time, a magic mirror from a fairy tale suddenly appears in front of you. What will you see in it? Fleischer was silent and speechless. Not to mention a little girl. It's the same for anyone. Russell sighed with pity. No matter how calm and dangerous it is, even if you know it's fake, who can resist not looking at it? With that, he patted Fleischer's shoulder and was full of curiosity. To be honest, I'm looking forward to what you will see. Since it's so dangerous, why should I go and see it? Seeing that his foxtail had finally revealed itself, Fleischer was furious. He felt that he could finish 8 bowls of turtle soup in one go. Of course, it's because you have the means to defeat it. Russell answered matter-of-factly. Among the people I know, only you have such qualifications and talents. Fleischer, only you can bring back the other half of her soul. After a subtle pause, his smile became more cheerful. At the same time, it's up to you whether I can bring the day-night mirror and celestial genealogy's armory home. When Fleischer finally couldn't help but pull out his knife and slash at his old face, he found that the old turtle in front of him disappeared like a phantom. Behind him, the elevator door finally opened, revealing darkness. In the empty hall, a strange silhouette vaguely appeared in the distance. Like a vortex interwoven by invisible shadows, people couldn't help but slide their eyes to the center. It made people want to see clearly what was there. The door-opening attack came suddenly. Fleischer instantly covered his face and closed his eyes. Don't look. Then, he frantically hit the elevator button with one hand, but the elevator seemed to have fallen into silence and didn't respond at all. Only the premonition of death was getting stronger and stronger. In his intuition, it was as if he could feel the invisible things brewing in the darkness growing rapidly. Countless strands of viciousness and fanaticism turned into substance, forming tentacles that stretched toward Fleischer little by little. Even under the suppression and seal of the holy coffin, the day-night mirror was still constantly hunting down every soul that dared to step into its domain. In the solidified air, Fleischer almost couldn't breathe. He felt as if he had fallen into the deep sea, gradually suffocating under the crazily rising water pressure. But soon, the terrifying pressure disappeared without a trace in an instant. A helpless sigh came from behind Fleischer. "Sigh, silly boy Tongi, you're finally willing to show up." Instantly, Fleischer was overjoyed. She turned around to look behind her, but there was no sign of the evil woman behind her. Instead, there was only an empty elevator, and the smooth, mirror-like surface of the elevator. Fleischer's startled face was projected on the mirror, and then a mocking smile gradually appeared. "Hello, Virgin Mary. Are you surprised?" The other Fleischer said happily, "What, at this time, you still want a woman who treats you as a tool to save you? That's really outrageous." Fleischer's vision went black. Damn, why does an authoritative relic have so many tricks up its sleeve? Oh, Now do you think the authoritative relic is tricking you? In the projection, Huaisher leaned on the door and looked at his expression as if he had seen a ghost. And why didn't Russell tell you this key information? No way, no way. Don't tell me there's anyone who thinks that old thing Russell would really trust someone else. Don't joke around. Huaisher, he's using you. The mirror emerged from the mirror, leaned out, and bent down to look at his face in midair. Look, a good tool, a pure and silly child. Since birth, you've been used by others until now. Who doesn't like you? Fu-E, who treats you as a trash can of negative energy. AI Ching, who treats you as a consumable. As long as she pretends to be delicate and pitiful, you'll rush forward regardless of your own safety. Luo Xian, who doesn't even know what love is. Or Tongyi, who hasn't told you what her purpose is until now. The mirror asked doubtfully. Huaisher, why do you always have unrealistic expectations of people? In a short silence, Huaisher slowly raised his hand and said seriously, Sorry to interrupt you. Can I ask you a question? Go ahead. The mirror tilted its head, took out a cigarette from its pocket, rubbed its hands and lit it, then blew a puff of smoke in his face. Do you still think I'll be kind enough to answer your doubts? No, I'm just curious. Huaisher said, If you are me, then I should also be you. If I'm in a split state now, then you should also be a part of Huaisher. So, we should both know each other's nature. He hammered his palm and asked curiously, Then why do you think I'll take your bullshit seriously? The mirror was stunned, but saw Huaisher reach out and smoothly take the cigarette from the corner of his mouth. He took 2 puffs and didn't feel any difference in the taste. He took out another pack from his pocket and looked at the mirror's pocket. Wow, 1 pack turned into 2. Huaisher exclaimed, Can the things inside be taken out? Are you still dreaming at this time? Huaisher? The mirror sneered and glanced at his naive look. Don't you know it clearly in your heart? The moment you saw the day-night mirror, you were already in a split state. It doesn't matter who comes, Luo Su will kick you into the pit. And from then on, you can only sleep forever. And Luo Su will take your hard work, the results of your hard work, and finally wait for you to die. At your funeral, he will shed 2 drops of fake tears, take your book of destiny, and succeed in rebuilding the kingdom of heaven's lineage. He paused for a moment, leaned closer, and whispered in Huaisher's ear, So, think about it yourself. The mirror took a deep breath and roared, Are you a F***king idiot? If I'm an idiot, what are you? Huaisher rolled his eyes and was unmoved. You're so smart, so powerful, and so loud. Are you especially looking forward to me refuting you? Why do I F***king share the same origin as an idiot like you? Do you think I want to? If you didn't overestimate yourself and take that damn thing, would I have run out like this? Let me guess. Huaisher smoked the cigarette he snatched from the mirror. According to the conventional plot, only one of us can walk out in one piece, right? If you're so smart, why don't you guess? It's clearly a simple condition, but why do 10 out of 10 people who take the mirror become idiots after they go out? The mirror roared in Huaisher's ear at the top of his voice. Because I don't want to. Listen carefully, old man. You won't. Will. You don't listen, as expected of me. Huaisher clapped his hand in appreciation. In other words, there's no other solution, right? The mirror sneered. If you kneel down and beg me, I can consider it. Kowtow to myself in front of the mirror? I don't think I'm that narcissistic, am I? Huaisher laughed, flicked the last of the cigarette ash, and stamped it out under his feet. Let me ask you, if I let you go out, what will you get rid of? Of course, I'll abandon evil and promote good, and be a new person, the mirror solemnly promised. But before he finished, he was amused. Do you believe me when I say that? Come on. Huaisher, why do you have to be so bitchy to yourself? Don't you know what you're thinking? Don't you ever have those thoughts that even you are afraid of and spurn? He put his hand on Huaisher's shoulder and whispered in his ear. There are so many good opportunities to make a move, but you miss them. Don't you ever regret it? Imagine, as long as you say you want, they will give you whatever you want. No matter how obscene your thoughts are, they can easily be realized. As long as you operate it well, 2, 3, or even 4 will not be a problem. In addition, the power you deserve, the wealth you should have. Think about how many things you have missed. Why sure, why sure, why sure, I'm also why sure. Why can't you give me the things you don't want? Why can't I be satisfied when you are enduring? I also have a lot of principles to tell you, but you will definitely scoff at them. Huaisher shook his head indifferently and raised his eyes. So, why don't we skip the nonsense stage and use our skills to see the truth? He said, right here, let's decide who is the real Huaisher. Good idea. The mirror image opened his arms and laughed. He took a step back, and his smile became as ferocious as the original. But why do you think that I am the only mirror image here? At that moment, Huaisher heard a voice from behind him. Holy light emerged, separating the world of nothingness from the darkness. Under the blessing of thousands of rays of glorious light, it was as if a god had sent down a clone. A familiar figure walked out of the light. He looked down at Huaisher and the mirror image with pity in his eyes. It was as if he was looking at some incombustible garbage, full of regret and regret. You repent. Chapter 948. Wow, the real Virgin Mary has appeared. The black mirror image next to Huaisher rested his elbow on his shoulder and sighed. Look, you didn't expect yourself to be so radiant, did you? Wait a minute. Huaisher pushed away the arm of the guy next to him in disgust. He raised his hand and asked, It's fine if he repents, but why am I also pointed at by the sword? Oh, you don't have to. The saint's mirror image turned the blade in disgust. Those who are born evil still need to be saved, and those who fall into depravity are incurable. That's right. Wait. Huaisher smacked his lips. Why did he feel that something was wrong? Why am I incurable and depraved? Mediocre and useless. The saint's mirror image glanced at him coldly. You have given up many lives. You have let down everything you have. Your life will eventually become meaningless because of laziness and the satisfaction of your desires. See, that's what a Virgin Mary is like. The mirror image next to Huaisher shook his head helplessly. I have a suggestion. Why don't we work together to kill him, and then discuss other things? Huaisher squinted. Then you'll stab me in the back, right? How about I join forces with him to kill you first? Are the dogs biting each other so soon? The saint sneered. Sorry, I don't have the habit of joining forces with evil and incompetent people. Tizka, look at the sins you've created. Are you done quarreling? Before Huaisher could answer, he heard a cold voice behind him. At the boundary between light and darkness, a slender and pale figure appeared. She rolled up her sleeves expressionlessly. Hurry up and finish it. Don't talk nonsense. That sickly face was full of boredom and disgust. She was too lazy to be long-winded. Hoarse and crazy laughter sounded from the other side. Am I late? Is it still early? A hideous face walked out of the darkness. Huaisher's scalp began to go numb. Looking at the silhouettes that appeared one after another in the void, they felt so numb that their heads went bald. When everyone looked at him, he felt the pressure of being stared at by countless people. Countless people who knew him the best, who were most familiar with him, and who were also a part of him, were staring at him. The choice is about to begin, my friend. Evil's mirror image put its hand on his shoulder, flicked the cigarette ash, and asked curiously, Are you ready? This is too exciting. Huaisher sighed softly, seemingly distressed, but he couldn't help but grin. What responded to him was countless joyful smiles that were exactly the same. It's about to start. In the chapel behind the dripping blood church, under the dome that was pieced together with colored windows, the old bishop who stood solemnly looked up. All the faces in the chapel were grave. The bishops of the Russian Federation were rarely seen in the past, but now they were all gathered here. Through the network formed by the Holy Coffin, the ascendants of the Russian Federation crossed a long distance and gathered here. Wearing black robes and purple and gold ribbons, their auras were solemn and dignified, making people not dare to breathe loudly. On the other hand, Catherine sat on the bench, holding the rosary beads in her hand as she prayed silently. Beside her, Alexei was pushing the sleeping girl in the wheelchair, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the projection on the altar, there was only darkness. It faintly reflected a strange, and huge mirror. In the mirror, there were colorful and dim flows, constantly interweaving illusions and beautiful scenes that didn't exist in the world. From time to time, the mountains of corpses and seas of blood in hell and terrifying scenes would appear. Even if one watched it through the projection, they couldn't help but feel their hearts tremble. If one was in a trance for a moment, even if one didn't see it directly, their soul would probably be pulled into it and be tainted by the curse formed by anger and pain. And in the projection, the moment the elevator opened, Huaishur had already lost his mind. Like a walking corpse, he stood in front of the huge bronze mirror. Lured by the changing soul, he stretched out his hand and pressed on the mirror. After breaking through the gap between reality and illusion, he walked into it. Then, countless illusions appeared, the number of which was still increasing, causing people to be dumbfounded. If it wasn't for the holy coffin's differentiation, everyone present would have thought that this was the illusion that lured them down to explore. It was unimaginable how there could be so many of them. It's normal, he passed the trial of the myriad heavenly sphere and obtained the highest evaluation of the ascendant. Russell didn't care about the cigar ash on the ground and said calmly, "This is only a part of it. There are more that have already been merged and rejected by him." The possibility of being rejected by that power, even the mirror of day and night can't show. It's too dangerous. The old bishop looked up. "Mr. Russell, life is not a balance. Sacrificing one person to save another is not advisable." "Of course." Russell nodded. "I could deeply agree with this, but I have a slight disagreement with your evaluation of the current situation. Our side has no intention of occupying the ownership of the mirror of day and night. We have always maintained a lockdown of information to ensure the greatest degree of safety. Now, it seems that your understanding of it is somewhat different. Because of this..." The old man muttered to himself for a moment, then sighed softly. "What the mirror of day and night reflects is not an illusion or a trial, but a reflection of a divine mark, using origin substance to recreate a brand new soul." At this moment, all the mirror images that Mr. Huaishur is seeing in the final analysis originate from a cross-section of his own essence. Under the interference of the curse, all the mirror images will resist each other with equal harshness. But there is no doubt that they are all a part of him and cannot be solved through brute force. Kill evil, destroy fanaticism, defeat sloth, defeat another self. It sounded very cool, but this wasn't the kind of self-challenge that was popular in Jump. It should be said that it was the exact opposite. There were countless people who used this method to pass the trial, but without exception, when they returned from the mirror, their souls were damaged. They had completely lost the part of themselves that they had killed, no matter if it was evil, good, sloth, or fanaticism. Once the mirror image was erased, that part of the soul would also be lost. The fact that there were so many mirror images didn't prove that Huaishur was special. Instead, it showed how dangerous the situation was. The more he killed, the more he would lose. In the end, apart from the self known as Huaishur, there would be nothing left, and he would become an empty shell that didn't care about the world at all. There is only one way to truly pass the interrogation of the mirror of day and night. It would make those fragments that were at odds with you and had absolutely no common language with you willingly acknowledge your main body. Lies wouldn't work, eloquence would be useless, and promises and threats wouldn't have the slightest effect. In the end, it was all about the trial taker. No one could lie or deceive them except to themselves. Most of the time, it was only to themselves that they could not forgive and forgive. This was an unsolvable dilemma. "Don't worry." Russell smiled happily and exhaled a wisp of green smoke. "It's hard to say for others, but for Huaishur, I'm afraid it's just a little troublesome. There won't be any trouble at all. Indeed, the more used to killing people, the more they would like to use killing to solve conflicts. If other sublimators were faced with such a situation, whether it was the main body or the mirror image, they would probably directly use the most straightforward method to solve the problem. But this was the only thing that didn't work in front of Huaishur. Believe me, although he's called the Sword of Disaster, no one in this world hates this title more than him. Russell stared at the scene in the projection and whispered softly, "King of Donbua, Prince of Paradise, Astronomical Association's Special Military Officer, Jinling's Beheading King, Grandmaster Killer." These are just descriptions that others gave him without permission. From the beginning to the end, the only title that he was willing to recognize and be proud of from the bottom of his heart was only one. In that instant, in the silent chapel, everyone was stunned at the same time. They raised their eyes in shock. It was as if they were hallucinating. A hallucinatory melody sounded from the darkness. In that instant, the darkness was turbulent, and the mighty melody galloped like a torrent, stirring up all the illusions and causing the deathly still darkness to tremble. Countless mottled colors quickly dimmed and shrank, turning into nothingness. In the heavily sealed Holy Artifact exhibition room, it actually fell into chaos at this moment. Everything lost its outline, and under the changes brewing in the mirror of day and night, various changes appeared. Everything was rapidly disappearing. In the end, only nothingness was left. It was just like the essence of the abyss. And as Huaishur in the mirror lowered his eyes and raised a bow, countless changes emerged from the chaos. It was as if the world was opened, accompanied by a soft and bright melody. The nothingness surged, spewing out innumerable gorgeous colors and changes. It was as if the soul was operating above the abyss, lighting up the first ray of light. Clear air rose, turbid air fell. Amidst the violent changes like thunder and lightning, bright and beautiful sunlight scattered from the sky, and all things grew. Spring had arrived. Vivaldi, Four Seasons Concerto, when countless cello melodies, whether low or high, bright or sad, overlapped in one place, it formed a mighty tide that spread and covered everything. Countless mirrors appeared in the void, reflecting the reflections of people who were looking down, as well as the gentle silhouettes of the instruments in their hands. Performance. The solemn performance that led the cycle of the four seasons, the birth and death of all things, as well as the rise and fall of all things, began. At this moment, whether it was good, evil, lazy, or fanatical, all the mirror images were like Huaishur, immersed in the melody. This was why Russell had confidence in Huaishur. In fact, in order to not cause any negative interference, he deliberately hid it from him. If it was an essence that had nothing to do with Huaishur, then it wouldn't matter even if they were all killed. But if it really came from a part of Huaishur, then it was impossible for a second situation to occur. If it was to determine who would become Huaishur, what kind of battle would be more suitable than this? Look, the musician's special performance has begun. Russell laughed and looked at the illusion in the mirror with gratification. Enjoy the performance, Huaishur. It's because this wonderful experience of playing with yourself countless times can only be had at this moment. This is a surprise that teachers specially prepared for you. Chapter 949. Pleasant Surprise. At this moment, Huaishur could no longer find any words to describe his current mood within the day and night mirror. He was so excited that his hands were trembling. His heart was also spasming with joy. When the majestic melody of the cello began to play, he was stunned by the power contained within it. He was completely subdued, and he almost prostrated himself on the ground, immersed in this boundless melody. He had never had such a rich and ecstatic performance experience before. He had never imagined that there would be so many versions of himself. There were so many differences and differences. They were clearly different from each other, but as soon as the performance began, everything was once again perfectly integrated into one. Even if he wanted to resist, and resist from the bottom of his heart, he could not deceive himself. He had never imagined that there would be so many changes and emotions that could be integrated into the melody. Those greedy, vicious, generous, sacred, addicted, fanatical, and even indulgent and inflexible. There were countless and incomparable performances. When all of these things merged into one, what was formed was the quartet that caused the Huai poetry to tremble in fear. Even in his most extravagant dreams, such a magnificent performance had never appeared. After forgetting his joy and sorrow, he completely immersed himself in this melody. He completely forgot himself. When the countless surging origin substances merged together in this melody, it created an unprecedented impact within the day and night mirror. The ripples spread outwards, causing the primal chaos to split open, revealing a brand new sky and earth. Sunlight and rain fell from the empty sky, and new buds and springs appeared on the barren earth. The vitality of spring filled the air, causing the mountains to grow verdant, the rivers to surge, and the seas to surge. A moist wind blew from the distance. Birds spread their wings and flew across the sky, overlooking the boundless earth. When the summer storm arrived, everything once again underwent a brand new transformation. The cruel sun and bright moonlight alternated, torrential rain and thunder intersected, and gales and lightning flashed. After the bleakness and melancholy of autumn, the first wisps of cold wind howled from the distance. Huaishi's 10 fingers could feel the chill of nothingness. Snowflakes drifted down from the melody, and the low humming became more and more resounding. It was like the galloping of a snowstorm, and the frozen frost burst forth with crisp echoes. The vast and mighty world was covered by the pale white wind and snow, but everything seemed so vast and profound. With the last allegro, countless cello melodies were played once again. Everything was out of Huaishi's control, even if the long, lingering sound dissipated in the wind. However, the rotating 4 seasons were still operating vigorously, as if they had been given life, and once again evolved into countless creations. In this brand new world, Huaishi raised his head and bathed in the wind that blew from afar. Behind him, none of the mirror images said anything. He only raised his eyes from the strings. Smiling, he gazed at everything in front of him. All of this was created by countless versions of himself. This world is so beautiful. Huaishi whispered, "Yes." Beside him, the mirror image who was smoking silently shrugged. "This is a scenery that I can't create. Only this, I have to admit." He said, "You did a good job." Huaishi smiled and nodded proudly. "Of course." The mirror image shook his head unhappily. "TSK, you didn't do it alone. What are you so proud of? Isn't this all because of me?" Huaishi turned his head and looked at him. He looked at the mirror image behind him. "So what's the result?" Huaishi said, "Don't sleep in and practice more." The saint clicked his tongue unhappily. "Don't think that you can make up the numbers by practicing with a knife. Eat more. What about raising fish every day? It's not like feng shui won't do it. I don't have any opinions about other things, but shouldn't you work harder on your relationship? Huh. Women will only affect the speed of my practice. I think it's better to cut my dick. In your dreams, I'm still a virgin. To be honest, I miss bad women. How dare you? What's wrong with Lily? When will our good brothers stand up? Huh. President AI spoils you too much. Call senior sister more often. Remember, be careful of firewood. Forget it, you don't have the guts anyway. Cutting my head too much, I'm rusty." Along with those words of farewell, the mirror images dissipated one by one in the refracted crystal light. In the end, only the most evil mirror image remained beside Huaishi. He smoked silently and looked at him sideways, his eyes full of displeasure. But in the end, he couldn't help but sigh. "Forget it. You definitely won't be willing to be a scumbag. But at least don't be so stingy when it comes to getting the monthly car next time. It's so infuriating." He raised his hand and patted Huaishi on the shoulder. "Don't leave any more regrets, Huaishi. Learn to love yourself." Just like that, the last mirror image took a step back, waved at Huaishi, and turned to leave. Once again, Huaishi was the only one left in the empty space. After an unknown amount of time, everything gradually dimmed again. When Huaishi raised his eyes again, he was already standing on a wide road in an old and busy town. Beside Huaishi, in the nursery in front of the hut, a middle-aged man was watering the garden with his head lowered. He looked surprised, but soon his expression changed. "Huaishi?" he asked. Huaishi nodded. "Go that way." The gardener who was watering the flowers pointed in a direction. "He's waiting for you." "Him?" Huaishi was puzzled. Who is he? The owner of this place. The gardener smiled and solemnly reminded him, "Be prepared to be troubled, Mr. Huaishur. When he loses his temper, it's quite scary." Huaishur was stunned. He suddenly understood the subtle malice of the town in front of him. It wasn't hostility from the gardener in front of him, nor was it any other killing intent. It was simply that the gardener didn't like him, an outsider, so he made things difficult for him everywhere. Even if he was walking on the road, if he wasn't careful, he might fall on the ground and fall on dog poop. Did I break any rules? Huaishur was puzzled. You have to understand. The gardener shrugged. When people get old, they will have some strange tempers. Young man, I wish you the best. He smiled gloatingly and waved back into the house. Along the way, Huaishur leaned against the wall carefully. Even so, he was still hit on the head twice by tiles falling from the wall, chased by passing stray dogs for a street, and scratched twice by cats jumping down from the fence. When the residents saw him, they weren't surprised. They just stood in the distance and admired his unlucky appearance. They pointed the way forward for him, but didn't mention anything else. In the end, he came to the front of an old house and stood in front of the door. But before he knocked, the door was opened. The old woman standing in the corridor smiled and gestured to Huaishur to whisper, indicating for him to come in. I won't. Go away, I won't listen. In the living room with a burning fireplace, the little boy sitting on the chair was still resisting other people's comforting and complained, I don't want Anna to go. We agreed to play games together. Okay, teacher, don't be like this. Didn't we agree? The middle-aged man with whiskers squatting next to him persuaded helplessly. How about I play with you? The little boy was stunned, then immediately shook his head and snorted. You're too weak. It's not fun. I'll call the others, okay? Everyone will play with you. I won't. The boy was angry. You're all dealing with me. The middle-aged man became more and more helpless, but when he saw Huaishur, it was as if he saw his savior. He coughed hard twice. The guest is already here. Teacher, manners. Pay attention to the manners of a senior. I don't want manners. The little boy jumped up from the chair, kicked him angrily, and stormed out. When he passed by Huaishur, he glared at her and shouted, Hey, Huaishur, you're so stupid. I hate you. Huaishur was stunned and at a loss. He didn't know what had happened. But the little boy had already walked away and didn't want to talk to him. After a long time, Huaishur asked a little nervously, did I disturb you? No, don't worry. Teacher just can't accept it. The middle-aged man picked up the coffee pot in front of the fireplace and poured a cup for him. How about a cup of coffee first? Huaishur took the cup and felt the real temperature and the burnt fragrance from the coffee beans. After taking a sip, he felt a warm current spread in his body, and his whole body became warm, accompanied by the crackling sound of the firewood in the fireplace. He sat on the chair and gradually relaxed. When he stared at the real scenery outside the window, he felt as if he was in a dream. He couldn't help but be curious. Where's this? It's probably the last place for the wandering souls and ghosts to stay, right? The middle-aged man shook his head bitterly and smiled. He solemnly asked, Please wait a little longer. Sonia, she is still saying goodbye to Anna. It's okay. Huaishur shook his head. I'm already very satisfied that you didn't kick me out. Then, do you want some more coffee? Okay. Huaishur's eyes lit up, and he picked up the cup. Not long after, footsteps could be heard coming from upstairs. The middle-aged woman whose eyes were still red held the little girl's hand and walked down the stairs. In the end, she reached out and tidied the little girl's clothes. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't hold back and hugged the little girl in her arms tightly. Did you bring everything? The old woman standing at the door of the hall asked. The middle-aged man shook his head. The things inside can't be taken out. He walked over and squatted on the ground, staring at his daughter's face. After a long time, he said seriously, Do you remember what Mom and Dad told you to do? Don't eat too many sweets and sleep early. Also, you have to listen to your big brother, okay? The little girl nodded vigorously and obediently followed her father to Huaishur's side. She let him hold her hand in Huaishur's hand. However, when she finally walked out of the door, she stopped. Looking back at her family behind her, she solemnly said goodbye. Mom and Dad, I'm leaving. Okay. The father, who was hugging his wife, nodded and gently wished, "Be careful on the road, my baby." Finally, he looked at Huaishur and said goodbye with a smile. "Please have a safe journey." Huaishur hesitated for a moment and couldn't help but ask, "Aren't you leaving?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "If you want to leave, you can leave at any time. Teacher didn't shackle us to leave. But if everyone leaves, won't he be the only one left?" On the wall not far away, the little boy, who was secretly looking over, snorted angrily. "Leave all of you! Leave all of you!" he shouted angrily. "I don't care anyway." At the door, the other residents who came to see them off looked at each other helplessly and couldn't help but laugh softly. "Go quickly, young man." The gardener waved his hand. "If you dawdle any longer, the old man will really lose his temper." Huaishur nodded respectfully and said goodbye. Holding the girl in his hand, he turned and left. The journey was smooth and unimpeded. There were no more accidents. However, Huaishur noticed the trembling fingers of the girl beside him. He lowered his head and asked, "Can't bear to leave, Anna. Mom and Dad said that I can't stay here any longer." Anna looked back at the blessings and smiles behind her. She lowered her head and felt uneasy. "I'm just a little scared. The outside world, the world without Mom and Dad and Grandpa Vitali, is very scary. But there are still people waiting for you in the outside world." Huaishur replied softly. "Bishop Catherine and Mr. Alexei are all waiting for you to return. With them around, you won't be afraid anymore. But I've been gone for so long. Will teacher be angry?" "Maybe." Huaishur was a little uncertain, but soon he smiled. "But she will definitely forgive you, as long as you sincerely apologize." Anna thought for a moment and nodded vigorously. "I will. Then let's go." Huaishur held her hand and walked towards the final path without looking back. They walked towards the outside world. In the quiet chapel, there was the sound of rapid breathing. In the wheelchair, the sleeping girl's eyelids twitched and her eyelashes trembled slightly. As if she had woken up from a nightmare, she opened her eyes and stared at the old man in front of her. After a long time, just like many years ago, she revealed a clear smile. There was no more madness and hatred. "I'm back, teacher," she whispered softly. "I'm sorry I'm late." In a long silence, Catherine reached out and stroked her cheeks, gently wiping away her tears. Although she tried hard to maintain her angry look, she couldn't hide the gentleness and joy in her eyes. "Welcome back, Anya." The moment Huaishur walked out of the mirror of day and night, he felt that his hand was empty. The girl in his hand dissipated like mist. If he didn't remember what had just happened, he would have thought that it was an extremely strange dream. But when he summoned the courage to look back again, he found that the image in the mirror behind him was also looking at him. His arms were crossed, and he was leaning on the frame of the mirror. However, this time, there were no strange scenes. He just raised his hand and threw the thing in his hand to Huaishur. Huaishur reached out and caught it. In his palm was a crystal-clear, broken crystal. They were like fragments of a mirror, flowing with dazzling colors. They were constantly changing, dazzling the eyes of those who saw them. "What is this?" He looked at the crystal in his hand, puzzled. "Take it as a local product that everyone gave you. But I forgot to include a manual, so it's up to you to use it." The image in the mirror waved goodbye. "Farewell, Huaishur." Huaishur smiled. "Isn't it better to say goodbye? TSK, who wants to see you again?" Along with the words of the image, countless diamond-like facets and edges suddenly appeared on the gorgeous and huge mirror. It quickly folded and shrank. In the end, it condensed into a resplendent gem. It suddenly broke through the bindings of the darkness and soared into the sky, disappearing. Only Huaishur was left standing in the same place, holding the souvenir in his hand. For a long time, he didn't look away. In his soul, the title page of the Book of Destiny ushered in a new change. The entry that had been silent for a long time shook slightly. It was blurry for a while, but soon it became clear again, breaking through the limits of mortals, surpassing the peak that geniuses could reach. After gathering the recognition and dedication of countless images, what came out was a skill that ushered in a huge transformation. That was the peak that no one could reach after several rounds of the whole realm. Even in the Infernal Music Association, it was an unprecedented height. Cello Performance LV 21. Chapter 950. When Huaishir woke up from the long dream again, he felt as if his whole body had been resurrected. He was extremely relaxed and comfortable. The sound of birds chirping and the fragrance of flowers outside the window came to his ears. The church not far away rang with a mighty bell. The faint hymns and the melody of the organ echoed in his ears. He could not help but hum softly. Then he opened his eyes. He caught a glimpse of the delicate face lying on top of him, looking down at him. Her slender and white arms pressed lightly on the head of the bed. She strangely propped up her entire body in the way of trampling mechanics and hung in the air. The assassination technique from the Inquisition, the spider suspension technique, was used so exquisitely that even Huaishir could not help but praise it. But now, the girl who was hanging on the head of his bed and looking down at him was blinking her eyes. She scrutinized his stunned face, and the corners of her mouth slowly curled up into a smile. She was like a female wolf hiding in the snow to hunt for food. "Good morning." Anna's lips opened and closed in a gentle greeting. The dagger in her other hand was aimed at his face and stabbed down. Bang! When she raised and closed her fingers, the sharp dagger and the sharp edge dipped and poison hovered in front of Huaishir's eyes. Then Huaishir sighed. His fingers trembled slightly, and a heavy blow comparable to a hammer went up the dagger and burst out, causing Anna to involuntarily let go. Before she could pull out the dagger at her waist again in midair to attack, a palm pressed on her face and gently clenched. Anna's eyes were exposed between the open fingers. She saw Huaishir's yawning expression. In the next moment, a loud bang burst out. As if she had been ejected from cannon, Anna flew out. Pushed by the huge force, her body rolled and spun nimbly, cleverly resolving the powerful force. She stepped on the wall and stood firm as if she had defied gravity. She raised her head to look at Huaishir. She was about to say something. Then she heard her heartbeat, pulse, and the expansion and contraction of her lungs. Countless messy things in her body rapidly converged and exploded with a symphony. The wall under her feet cracked, and she couldn't help but fall back. Along with the flying dust and bricks, it broke through the wall and flew into the corridor. It then broke through the wall at the other end of the corridor and smashed into the room of another traveling preacher. It flew over the praying priest's head and smashed through the window. Then it clung onto a straight flagpole, flipped over, and nimbly stood on top of the flagpole. He squatted down and looked at Huaishir through the 5 or 6 cracks that had pierced through the ground. The corners of his mouth curled up. She revealed an innocent smile that was completely different from before. He was full of curiosity about everything that had just happened to him. "How did you do it? Guess." Huaishir rubbed his face, put on his slippers, got up, walked to the bathroom, and began to brush his teeth and wash his face. But in the gradually spreading noise, the girl nimbly leaped from the flagpole, tapped lightly on the gap in the wall and the pillar of the bed, and returned to the room like a beast. Then she flipped over the door of the bathroom, and then made a perfect 360-degree turn in the air. She got into the space less than 30 centimeters between Huaishir and the mirror, squatted down, and stepped on the sink. Her gaze was level with Huaishir, and she looked at him carefully. Her aggressive and provocative gaze had not changed at all from before. Huaishir brushed his teeth expressionlessly and sighed vaguely. "Didn't you say that you changed back? Why are you still like this?" Where was the little girl that he had personally brought out of the day in Night Mirror, who was fragrant, soft, cute, and obedient, and who had talked to her big brother? Why did she enter the rebellious period in the blink of an eye? Could it be that you like the obedient and obedient type? Anna came closer and put her arm on the wall behind Huaishir. Suddenly, she tilted her head and smiled innocently. "Then please take care of me in the future, Teacher Huaishir." Huaishir rolled his eyes and looked at the arm that had pinned him against the wall. "Is this considered sexual harassment? You have to be a little forceful occasionally." Anna blinked. "As long as I'm the one taking advantage, it doesn't matter." Huaishir sighed, tilted his head, and spat out the foam in his mouth. He rinsed his mouth, put down the cup and toothbrush in his hand, and wiped his face. Then he raised his hand, intending to teach the little rascal in front of him how to respect her elders. But soon a hand reached out from the side, pinched her collar, lifted her up, and threw her out of the door like a naughty kitten. "All right, Anya, although your teacher looks very open, he's actually very conservative. Don't joke around anymore." Russell said, "Go play at the side and let the adults have a chat." Anna nimbly turned over on the fulcrum of the wall, stepped on a string of icicles, and walked to a place not far away. "You're only awake now? It seems that playing is also very tiring. I really hope you'll be satisfied with this gift." Russell picked up the tray in his other hand. "I brought you breakfast. Let's talk while we eat." He snapped his fingers, and the flying dust and debris in the room disappeared, leaving a clean and tidy scene. Only the cracks that had just been smashed were busy workers who appeared and began to quickly repair them. Fleischer sat in front of the table, not in a hurry to eat his breakfast. Instead, he keenly noticed Russell's wording and address. "Teacher." "Yes, teacher." Russell laughed. "You've been teaching for so long. You shouldn't be frightened just because you're called teacher, right?" "Who said I wasn't frightened? This is too big of a shock." Fleischer stared at Anna, who was not far away, and then looked at Russell with a serious expression. "What's the matter?" "It's the literal meaning of the matter." Russell shrugged. "She must have a place in the celestial genealogy. This is Kadia's request. You can just treat it as an additional condition." The corner of Fleischer's eyes twitched wildly. "You'd rather borrow flowers to present to Buddha? You should be responsible for Bishop Catherine's request. Why are you adding more work for me? You think I don't want to? Well, I might not want to. After all, a student is already troublesome enough. But this time, she specifically asked you to come. Cough, cough. Come on." The old tortoise stretched out his hand, took out a letter of appointment, and slapped it on the table in front of Fleischer. "Last night, the Russian Federation's Central Church of Christ the Savior has approved. The Patriarch of the Eastern Region has personally signed it. You will be Anna's teacher." "What the hell?" Fleischer's eyes widened as he looked closer. His eyes were illuminated by the gilded title. At the end of the letter was the Church of Christ the Savior's seal, the Patriarch of the Eastern Region's signature, and the insignia of the sixfold key. This letter of appointment was equivalent to law within the Russian Federation, or even more effective than law. The only question was, why was this letter of appointment given to him? "No, I'm not even a believer. This is the Knight Commander of the Inquisition." Fleischer picked up the letter of appointment and looked at it for a long time, carefully analyzing the origin substance fluctuations on it. He said suspiciously, "You didn't go to the south gate of our school and buy this, did you? If you forge the Patriarch's signature, you'll be sent to hell. What's there to be afraid of? You're just an honorary member of the Inquisition. Your status is just a bit higher, that's all. If you want to talk about how useful it is, it's not as useful as your title of King of Dombwa." Russell said, "Isn't this telling everyone that you're half a member of the Inquisition? It's more convenient for you to teach students." Fleischer shook his head. "I already have students. You already have too. One more won't make much of a difference." Russell spread his hands. "You're a professional. Can't you teach everything that the Inquisition can teach? You can teach what the Inquisition can't. Besides, I did recommend Isaac, Ramanujan, and Madame Chun, but they didn't take a liking to them. This was something that the child requested of his own accord." As he spoke, Russell glanced at a spot not too far away. Outside the crack, Anna poked her head out again. She propped up her chin and smiled at Fleischer. She was excited and happy. Her eyes were dark green. When she looked at others, it felt like she was a white wolf running freely through a snowy plain. Fleischer glanced at her and couldn't help but sigh. Why is she still like this? Did something happen to her recovery? Nothing happened. It's natural. You're just imagining things. Russell shook his head. It takes 3 days to learn bad things, but 3 years to learn good things. Even if her good nature has returned, her evil nature is still deeply rooted. If you want her to change, you still have a long way to go. Besides, regardless of good or evil, isn't she still the same? With the precepts and dogma of the Inquisition, she won't fall. She's just a little awkward. Just treat her like a naughty child from a relative's house. If she's disobedient, just beat her up. If one round doesn't work, then beat her up a few more times. At the very least, I see that you're quite proficient in beating her up. Hey, don't get more and more ridiculous. I don't have a hobby of beating students. It doesn't matter if you do. Iron fist correction is also part of education. Russell didn't care about this at all. He just said casually, in short, before and after the War of the Worlds, Katia will be very busy. She asked you to take care of her child for a while. This is also her trust in you. If you teach this student well, it'll be very convenient for you to make friends with the Russian Federation genealogy. Don't be so utilitarian, okay? Huaisher squinted. Not everyone likes to treat students as tools. Russell didn't seem to hear his sarcasm at all. He just asked straightforwardly, "Then are you going to teach her or not?" Huaisher was speechless for a moment. Looking at Anna not far away, he felt a headache coming on. "You were the one who personally brought her out from Mr. Vitali's place, Huaisher." Russell didn't mind the commotion. Even brought up the last seedling of the road of transformation for you. If you ask me, you should also live up to his trust in you. Recalling the child who angrily looked over from the top of the wall, the couple who entrusted their daughter to a stranger, and the blessings of the residents, Huaisher felt a sense of loss. He was speechless. Holding on to a glimmer of hope, Huaisher asked softly, "Is there really no hope for them to recover?" Russell slowly shook his head. To be able to let those souls survive until now is the result of Vitali and Pelagia doing their best, Huaisher. Not every story has a good ending. He said, "There will always be some that will make people sad." Chapter 9:51. Vitali Spolovsky, Pelagia Mosvina. They were the ascendants who had once stood at the peak of the road of change. They had inherited the existence of Black God Chernobyl and White God Belowberg. They were the embodiment of the world's evil and all the pure good. If they could survive until now, they would probably be several generations older than Russell. In fact, they had entered as the second batch of members in the early days of the Republic. It was because of them that the Silver Sea was able to completely isolate Boshuan's demonic corrosion and the Pied Piper solidification transformation at its weakest early stage. At the same time, it was also because their existence was so important that they were the first to be attacked by the Golden Dawn when the Kingdom of Heaven fell. Half of the ascendants of the Road of Change were swept into the broken Kingdom of Heaven and dissolved into fragments. The other half of the survivors were separated by the rescue team that came later and were unexpectedly stabbed in the back. In the end, only the last fragment left behind by Black God and White God after they abandoned everything, the mirror of day and night. When Pelagia completely burned out the authority of the White God, the only thing left was the Philosopher's Stone, which was filled with hatred and madness for everything. The surviving Vitali also paid a huge price to protect the students who had dissolved in the records. In the end, his mind deteriorated and his consciousness was incomplete. He was like a child. The small village in a mirror image was the last shelter left behind by the White God. It was the final resting place of the shattered souls. To Vitali, everyone's existence was the most precious treasure in the world. After Huaisher passed the trial, he was allowed to enter and successfully brought back Anna's soul. In addition to the choice of Anna's parents, the tacit consent of the incomplete Black God was also indispensable. To be able to give him such heavy trust after being stabbed in the back by his companions. Even Russell couldn't do it. In the end, "It's all because of you," Russell said. "It's not your book that he trusts, but yourself." "Why?" Huaisher was stunned. "I didn't do anything." "Don't underestimate Black God's foresight." Russell smiled. The moment the day and night mirror shone on you, he had already seen through your essence, whether it was what you showed or what you hid. Your mirror image would not keep a secret for you. It was precisely because of this that she placed such precious hopes on him. It was also because of this that he hated Huaisher so much. Out of everyone, perhaps Vitali was the only one who hoped that Huaisher wouldn't be able to pass the trial, because once Huaisher succeeded, it would be time for him to part with his treasure. No matter how outstanding a teacher is, In the end, he will only be a passerby in the student's life. Russell stared at the blood-dripping church outside the window. It was as if he could see the silhouette of the person praying with lowered eyes. Traveling together, accompanying each other, guiding the way to the distance. But there will be a time when we part. There will be a companion waiting ahead. Therefore, you don't have to feel too much pressure. You just have to do your best. That's enough. Whether it's Kadia or Mr. Vitali, they all have confidence in you. Huaisher lowered his head and ate his breakfast in silence. After finishing the bacon and fried egg on the plate, he put down his fork. After a long time, he sighed softly. Only now did I realize that the home visit has already been done. I have no choice but to admit it. I've already said that you have the potential. Russell patted him on the shoulder and turned to leave. In the silence, Huaisher looked at the cars coming and going outside the window. Suddenly, he turned back and looked at the girl quietly waiting behind the crack. "Hey, Anna, can you drive?" "Yes." Behind the wall, the girl peeked her head out again as if she had been discovered playing hide-and-seek. She blinked her eyes. "Just call me Anya. Then go and prepare your luggage, Anya." Huaisher said, "The journey full of arrangements is about to begin." Basking in the morning sun, he leaned on the chair and quietly enjoyed the last moment of leisure. He sighed silently. He felt that he was not very qualified as a teacher. After being away for so long, he wondered how the students at home were doing. Huaisher took out his phone. He dialed the number expectantly. 10 minutes later, the well-behaved Yuan received the concern from her teacher. And the joy of the little cabin in the woods, who was trying to muddle through, was doubled. Amidst the long-awaited cries, Huaisher happily put down his phone and smiled. He felt that the teacher-student relationship had become more stable. Under the afternoon sun, the huge transport plane whistled as it took off. Loaded with huge war weapons and black-clothed priests and soldiers, it flew into the distance. Next to the runway, the orderly soldiers gathered in a square formation, with their heads held high, waiting for orders from their commanding officer. First, Volgograd, then transit through the border of the ice field, and finally to the wilderness to set up defenses. The left and right of the guards, Russell seemed to know the whereabouts of the soldiers like the back of his hand. He leaned on the chair in the lounge and commented on the troops below one by one. He also pointed out to Huaisher the group of solemn and cold cultivators in linen clothes at the front. "Look, that's the real elite, the combat company of the benevolent knights, all of them sublimated. This should be reinforcements going to the front line of hell." This time, the Russian Federation was obviously stimulated by Dongxia's battle in the Blessed Land a few years ago. They planned to take advantage of the War of the Worlds to launch another glorious expedition to the east, even though he did not hear any gunshots or see any swords. But when those huge fighting forces slowly passed through the floor-to-ceiling window, Huaisher could feel an imminent sense of crisis, as if the war was slowly approaching. Huaisher asked, "Not only defense, but also counterattack to hell?" Of course, more hell is excavated, more materials and power. The War of the Worlds is not only a crisis of the present realm, but also an opportunity to replenish the present realm's development power. Every War of the Worlds can bring a huge amount of resources for the major lineages. Everyone is already rubbing their hands and can't wait. Huaisher flipped through his phone and saw the pop-up message on tomorrow's news. Dongxia headline: "The Dragon Vein has begun the preheating stage. The Chunjun project may be online." The attached picture was a photo of the spokesperson Dieting. As for the series of political words below, he was too lazy to look at it. Even if he was traveling, he could still feel it. Hell was gradually heating up, causing the cauldron of the present realm to boil, and the undercurrent from the deeper levels began to surface. And a series of changes had also been triggered in the present realm. According to the report in the cabin in the forest, Ingzhou had officially begun the liquidation of the remaining forces of the general, and everyone in the looming mansion was in danger. But Rigian's stinky sister, Hupa, was in the limelight and was expected to become the right minister as the king of Anfang. The revival of the Rigian family was a foregone conclusion. And America also began a new round of blood sacrifice to the god of cruelty at its borders and in hell, using the blood of hell to create miracles. In Rome, the Hall of the Pharaoh was operating day and night. New decrees were issued, and the guard wore the badge of a staff and an axe as they rushed around. In India, with the support of their natural enemy, the green neck, the creation lineage finally suppressed the maintenance lineage and the destruction lineage, and took over power with a slight advantage. With the bloodshed and destruction, the priests and elders from various monasteries finally formed a united front. The only one that didn't have any news was the Egyptian lineage. But the Egyptian lineage had always been shrouded in fog and rarely revealed to the public. The information revealed every year was neither light nor heavy. Occasionally, a prince would be executed for violating the precepts, but the outside world would only hear about it after half a year. Even if the royal family made a big move, the outside world wouldn't know. As for the various bounties offered in the collection of sins, the reward for exploring the graveyard of the returnless hell exploration quest had increased by several times. However, the number of players willing to accept the quest was decreasing. The observers of the bronze I began to enter and leave various places on the border, observing the depth of the data to supply the computing needs of the rear. The continuation court's various properties also began to frantically transfer funds. As for the Directorate of Defense, all the vacations had been canceled, and everyone began to work the endless 007. It was impossible to die suddenly even if they wanted to. The slightest problem would cause them to be dragged down for an injection and then continue to work overtime. Every time this happened, Huai Shi, who was sent out, would take pleasure in other people's misfortune. Damba's work was all thrown to the students, and the work of the ivory tower was all done by Vice President Isaac. While everyone was complaining in their circle of friends, there was only one person who was as annoying as a stray dog. He kept posting photos and videos of his travels. Who knew how many people he had blocked and blocked? Where are we going next? Huaisher put away his phone and asked. Next, Russell's expression showed a rare trace of seriousness and distress. I always feel that both are troublesome. Egypt or Rome, you pick one. Huaisher looked at him sideways and didn't say anything. He didn't pick. What if he was pushed to the side when the time came? However, just as the two of them were conversing, an ear-piercing alarm suddenly appeared above the military airport. Crimson lights lit up one after another, as if everyone was burning up. The high-pitched gap alarm echoed in their ears. The originally orderly airport was suddenly hit by a sudden impact, but the chaos didn't spread. Soon, under the command of various officers, all the priests and soldiers quickly began to prepare for battle. Huaisher's scalp went numb. This was the transportation hub of the Russian Federation, the industrial center, and the capital of the Ural region. Why would there be such an outrageous air raid alarm? Could it be a false alarm? But even if it was a false alarm, it was too outrageous. Any aircraft that wasn't on the safe list would have been shot down from 8,000 kilometers away. Or was it an intercontinental missile? But why was there no premonition of death under such great pressure? Not only on the ground, but also in the sky, figures appeared one after another. Before the battle formation of the Knights of the Benevolent Hall was dressed, the canonized saints had already arrived in the sky above the airport through the Holy Coffin Network. Then, Huai Shi, who was in front of the window, caught a glimpse of the spectacular scene of the sky shattering. In the rainbow light that fell from the sky, many square cracks quickly appeared in the originally blue sky. They cracked, shattered, and separated. And in the darkness behind, under the depth, a huge shadow descended. It enveloped everything. The solemn and luxurious palace was suspended in the sky. In the fierce wind that tore through the troposphere, it slowly descended. Countless lush greenery emerged from the palace, and the flow of the waterfall could vaguely be seen. Countless guards in golden armor stood on the walls of the palace, and 16 huge bugles sounded the thunder of the arrival of the Supreme One. It was a miracle handed down from generation to generation. The noble carriage that belonged to the great emperor, the embodiment of the glory and brilliance of Rome. Sky Courtyard Severus. This is F*** King outrageous. Fleischer suddenly lost his voice. Chapter 952. Without any notification or diplomatic note, the palace of the Roman emperor appeared above the Russian Federation without any warning, directly above the military airport. It was a terrible scene that could be regarded as a declaration of war at any time. At this moment, after a short period of noise and chaos, everything quickly returned to order. It was as if nothing had happened. The decision from the patriarchs reached Ural. It was just an annoying neighbor visiting. There was no need to make a fuss. Everything was operating as usual. Soon, the two imperial guards who had obtained permission to land were holding axes that represented authority. They wore golden armor and walked into their lounge with their heads held high. After looking around, they ignored Anna, who was behind Fleischer, and stopped in front of them. "Mr. Russell, His Majesty invites you in." His Majesty? Fleischer was a little sluggish. "Which is Majesty? Pay attention to your wording, Mr. Fleischer." The Imperial Guard looked stern and said proudly, "In Rome, there's only one honorable His Majesty, and the people only have one supreme emperor." Fleischer's vision turned black. The current Roman emperor, the sixth Titus in history, was in the courtyard in the sky and wanted to meet Russell. "No, you are an emperor, the Lord of Rome. Why did you come to the Russian Federation repeatedly for this? What are you doing?" The occupation of an emperor can be really scary when he is childish sometimes. Russell shook his head self-deprecatingly. "I was thinking of flipping a coin. Now it seems that His Majesty will not allow the coin to have a picture of himself next to him, right?" Before he flipped the coin followed the will of the emperor and gave the result. "Follow me, Fleischer." Russell waved to the students behind him and his students. "I will take you to the courtyard in the sky to broaden your horizons." The Imperial Guards quietly made way for them. They respectfully welcomed the arrival of the emperor's distinguished guests. It was clear that the current generation had better choices, better helicopters, and more convenient methods. However, the Romans still followed the rules of the past and chose a method that did not have any quality-price ratio. They chose the golden carriage to go back and forth, and they were proud of it. When one truly stood in front of the majestic watchtower in Madeira, one could feel a pressure and exclamation that one couldn't feel on the ground. This extravagant palace soared in the sky without any weapons or equipment. It was purely for the purpose of showing off its luxurious and glorious beauty. Even the mirror-like marble slabs under his feet were inlaid with golden patterns and reliefs. There were countless works of art and exquisite decorations that could be seen. It was as if he was surrounded by all the beautiful things in the world. Gold, flowers, and beauties, it was a feast for the eyes. The servants who came and went were all dressed in white silk robes. They were robust and handsome, and their faces were beautiful. The beautiful women who were filled with all kinds of amorous feelings were dazzling. His attentive service was even more meticulous. However, when the servant bowed his head, Fleischer raised his hand and patted the back of Anna's head without looking back. "Don't always look at his neck." "I didn't look," the girl quibbled. "How do you know that I looked?" "Because I was looking too." Fleischer glanced back at her. "I also know that you looked 1 centimeter too low." Anna glared at him and said nothing in anger. The servants served him respectfully. Although he couldn't understand what they were talking about, he inexplicably felt a little cold on his neck. The corner of the eyes of the ceremonial officer who followed him twitched slightly. He was expressionless and pretended not to hear such a disrespectful conversation. The deeper they went, the more gorgeous everything they saw along the way. In the end, Fleischer was almost numb. But when the last door opened in front of him, he still couldn't help but be stunned. Because thick water vapor spewed out from the crack of the door, accompanied by the sound of water splashing, singing, and the roar of the waterfall. The pure white marble wall was flawless, and the carved beast head on the wall was constantly spewing warm water from the highest platform. And the burning spices in the copper stove made the air dense with rich warmth. In the melodious melody of alive musicians, Huaishur was now in front of a bathhouse. Hiss! Huaishur sucked in a breath of the cold air behind the door. Suddenly, he had an illusion that he didn't come to the palace of the Roman emperor, but accidentally entered a northeast bathhouse. He subconsciously reached out, wanted to take a card, wash up, and soak for a while in the pool. After a sauna, he went up to take a big bath, and finally a buffet meal, and then he could fall asleep. Is there something wrong with your palace? Huaishur couldn't help but imagine the scene of the emperor lying on the massage bed and enjoying a massage. The diligent masseuse skillfully patted the emperor's, but after rubbing his back, indicating that the emperor should turn over. That was too exciting. What are you doing? Huaishur, change your clothes. Russell, who had already walked to the changing room, waved at Huaishur. Bathing is a part of Roman culture that must be experienced. This is a VIP reception. What are you hesitating for? Could it be that you're thinking of something embarrassing? Then you'll be disappointed. The old man laughed and walked in through the door. Huaishur's expression twitched. To be honest, he was not ready to be honest with this old man. After hesitating for a long time, he changed his clothes a little helplessly. But when he turned back, his eyes paused on Russell's back. The thin old man had wrapped a bath towel around his body. His naked upper body was covered with a layer of shocking burn marks and 2 crisscrossing scars. The texture of the skin was clearly visible. Even after a long time, it had not been completely healed, and on the back that was covered with scars, a solemn and dignified outline was engraved. The pitch-black giant tree was divided into 9 forks, representing the 9 great kingdoms. Those horizontal branches with sharp edges and corners entangled with each other, turning into a huge totem that seemed to encompass the entire world. The World Tree, with the Mimir Spring as the source, it evolved into a great miracle. This was the symbol of all the true knowledge in the world. And sensing Huaishur's gaze, Russell just smiled indifferently and glanced at him. Your figure is not bad, but it's a little too white. You need more sun. How about I lend you my tanning box for a few days? No need. Huaishur shook his head and felt melancholy. Unless he found an abyss stylist to recuperate, he would never get tanned in this life. He would always be a pretty boy. And just as they followed the attendant, just as they stepped out of the door and stepped onto the steps leading to the top, they heard an impatient, hoarse voice coming from the highest place. Too slow, Russell. I've been waiting for you for a long time. On the highest platform, where all the beautiful scenery could be seen at a glance, there was a wide and huge bath. The person who spoke had his back to them, casually reached out, took a glass of wine from the attendant's tray, raised his head, and drank it in one gulp. He looked about 30 years old, but his temples were already gray, his long hair draped over his shoulders, and his face was still stained with water droplets. Just like that, he sat in the gorgeous bath without any concealment, his arms casually resting on the edge of the bath. It was hard to imagine that he was the supreme ruler of Rome, the ruler of authority, the king of lineage, and the most honorable emperor in the entire territory. At this moment, he looked back at the 2 people behind him and seemed to be joking. How dare you make the emperor wait for so long? It's disrespectful. What came out of his mouth was clearly Latin, but when it reached Huaishur's ears, what sounded from his soul was the Dongxiao voice that was extremely familiar to him. Being stared at by that pair of dark eyes, his heart instinctively tightened. Even if there was no killing intent or disgust, his intuition kept sending out alarms, as if telling him that everything in the world was in the hands of this man. Subconsciously, he wanted to bury the bath scene that he had just imagined. He added 2 shovels of soil, wishing he could flatten it. If someone found out, he was afraid that he would be beheaded after the VIP bath. Russell still calmly stepped forward, bowed slightly, and responded with a smile. Thank you for waiting for so long, Your Majesty. However, before meeting the Emperor, how can I not prepare more? No matter how prepared you are, or if you are afraid of trouble, it doesn't matter. The Emperor shook his head casually. Since you didn't come to see me, I simply came to see you. It was as if opening his palace to the military base in the 5 continents was like going for a walk after breakfast. He was extremely calm and not surprised at all. Instead, he opened his arms to show off, pointed at the palace in front of him, and asked proudly, "How do you feel? Luo Su, is this temporary imperial residence of mine beautiful? It's the only one in the world. It's beautiful." Russell nodded and praised from the bottom of his heart. Then, Titus laughed, and the solemn atmosphere disappeared. He glanced at Huaishur behind Russell and waved his hand. "Don't be reserved. Enjoy as much as you want. There is no difference in status here. Being able to enjoy this moment is not a waste of my hospitality." Naturally, it should be so. Russell had already taken off his bath towel and stepped into the bath. He stretched his body comfortably and laid down in the warm pool. Huaishur's eyes twitched. Beside him, he didn't know whether to go into the water or not. He looked at the two of them awkwardly. Then he realized that in the bath, Titus was also naked. Thinking of the habits and customs of the Romans of the past generations, he was a little afraid. What if the emperor was on a whim and coveted his beauty and ordered him to perform swordsmanship? What should he do? However, Titus had already raised his eyes and looked over again with a faint smile. "Oh, kid, you seem to admire my jade body." His Majesty the Emperor's mouth curled up and waved at him. "If you want to compete with me, come on. I'll give you the honor of looking up to me. It's also one of the duties of an emperor to teach the ignorant to receive dignity." Ha ha ha. Before he could finish his sentence, he started laughing to himself. Obviously, he was very confident in his victory. Huaishur couldn't help but shrink back a little. Forget it. Forget it." He waved his hand and coughed twice. Compared to His Majesty the Emperor, this little strength of mine is really insignificant. The leaders were taking a bath happily. He wasn't stupid enough to argue with them. It wouldn't be good to win or lose. "You win, okay? That's true." Titus seemed to be very appreciative of Huaishur's self-awareness. He pinched his chin and praised, "I like young people like you. If it weren't for those boring guys in the Directorate of Command who made things difficult, I would have asked you to be under my command." Shocking. It turned out that he had been targeted for a long time. Huaishur felt a chill at the back of his head and suddenly felt a little scared. His chastity was in danger. Chapter 9:53. After teasing Huaishur with a few words, Titus did not say anything else. Instead, he changed the topic and talked to Russell about other things. Romance, cutting-edge technology, and even fine wine and delicacies. He did not even neglect the insignificant Huaishur next to him. It made one feel like a spring breeze. Just like what he had promised before, there was no superiority in the bathroom, and he was not so bored as to insist on using the two of them to demonstrate the supreme authority of the emperor. It could be seen that His Majesty had profound attainments and insights in both performance and food. He even seemed to have paid attention to a small place like Doomsday. He even had some understanding of Anna's situation. So that's how it is. It has been completed again. In that case, the path of transformation can also be passed down. The efforts of the Pioneer Association in the past will not be buried. This is really a good thing. Titus looked at the pool below and stared at the girl who jumped down from the springboard. He was full of admiration. "You have planted a new seed, Russell. I believe you will soon usher in a year of harvest, right? How is this my credit?" Russell smiled and said, "It should be my student's achievement. That is his student, so it should also be his result. Isn't this the reason why humans pass it down from generation to generation?" Titus shook his head. Bloodline, knowledge, spirit, pain, and ideals. There is no superiority in inheritance. If you ask me, it is precisely because you still choose such a path with free will after breaking away from the shackles of bloodline that it is even more admirable. The glory of the Republic still continues on you. This is something that I have witnessed with my own eyes. Russell, there is no need to be humble. Just accept it with pride. He slowly got up from the bath and took a bath towel from the guard. After casually wiping himself, he looked back at the two of them. "It's time for lunch. Do you want to join me?" The Emperor's invitation and the delicacies of the Golden Palace. No one can refuse these two reasons. Russell nodded happily. Admittedly, this lunch was the most extravagant and exquisite meal Huaishur had ever eaten. There was no need to mention the delicious food. The guests were enthusiastic, and the atmosphere was warm. However, Huaishir felt that the atmosphere at the banquet was becoming more and more solemn, and she felt that she could not eat. On the other hand, it was Russell who was eating and drinking. He was chatting and laughing as if he was attending a buffet for a charity fund. After a joyous and harmonious lunch, those who were fortunate enough to attend the meeting politely excused themselves. After the waiter took down all the plates and replaced them with drinks for the guests, the waiter said, without waiting for Russell's opening remarks, Titus swirled the wine glass in his hand and said straightforwardly, "Let's not waste any more time. Russell, let me ask you, are you preparing to reorganize the celestial genealogy?" It was so abrupt and direct that he placed the most important question at the forefront. In front of the Supreme Emperor, fancy lies and hypocritical guarantees were useless. This was the dialogue between the emperor and the professor, the head of the genealogy of Rome, and the remaining descendants of the Utopia. It was enough to determine their next stance and whether they would extend a helping hand or take measures. Russell did not evade the question. "That's exactly what I'm doing." "Very good." Titus nodded approvingly. "Since that hairless old snake and that group of monks who only know how to chant scriptures have already placed their bets, I won't be stingy. Without any conditions, the emperor generously promised, state your request, and Rome will satisfy you. Financial resources, material resources, new blood, and assistance. As long as it's not excessive, I can give it to you. Thank you for your generosity, but I don't have anything I desire from Rome." After pondering for a moment, Russell raised his head and said, "However, can I ask your majesty to release my former companions? If your majesty is willing to show mercy, then I will definitely do my best to repay Rome's generosity." It was unknown what Russell was talking about. At that moment, Huaishir keenly felt that the atmosphere in the room had changed. Not only were the secretaries and attendants not far away shocked, but also the imperial guards guarding in front of the door, as well as Titus's undisguised coldness and displeasure. "Such a request is too ungrateful, Russell." He slowly shook his head. "You should know that Rome has never been kind, and there's a limit to their generosity." "I'm well aware." Russell shook his head. "But his existence is an indispensable help to us. He's just one person. Compared to the huge wealth and resources, he's insignificant, isn't he? If it's just one person, there's no need to say anything, but what's at stake is the face of the royal family." In the dead silence, Titus's expression was cold. His fingers tapped on the table in front of him as he stared coldly at Russell's face. However, from the beginning to the end, the old man's calm expression did not change at all. "You've given me a difficult problem, Russell," the emperor said. "You even make me wonder if you're humiliating me." Russell did not turn pale with fright. He just shook his head. "I have no such intention. It's just that this is my purpose, so I didn't dare to rush to your door. If it's not my uncle, it's fine if I let you take him away. However, after all, the slightest mistake will cause the royal family to lose their decorum." Titus paused for a moment, then asked solemnly, "Do you understand what I mean?" "Of course." Russell raised his head and solemnly promised, "I will bear all the consequences." "That's how it should be." Titus warned solemnly, "Russell, if anything happens to my uncle, you'll have to face the wrath of Rome." Russell smiled. "If it really comes to that, I'll offer my head to ask for forgiveness." "Ask for forgiveness?" "Ha! Mimir's head is worth collecting, but unfortunately, I'm not interested." Titus asked again, "Russell, although you don't have any request for Rome, Rome has a request for you. Since the celestial genealogy is going to be rebuilt, what do you plan to do with the Golden Dawn? Aren't we enemies from the beginning? There's no other choice to talk about, right?" Russell replied, "There's only life and death." "Very well." Titus finally raised the wine glass in his hand. "Then let's drink to our heart's content. I hope you can achieve something." The cold wine slid down his throat, but it burned like a flame. The convulsive pain and the oath were engraved into the bone marrow. "Since the matter has been discussed, you should leave." Titus got up and left. "Rome will fulfill its promise to you, and I hope you will do the same." It was like an illusion. Huaishir actually caught a glimpse of melancholy in the Supreme Emperor's eyes the moment he turned around. Soon, an attendant walked up to him. After receiving the order, he took Russell to the depths of the floating courtyard. In the gorgeous courtyard full of birds and fragrant flowers, Huaishir followed the attendant and walked into a courtyard hidden behind layers of beautiful scenery. From the outside, it looked like a library with many books, brimming with the aura of knowledge. However, the attendant didn't go any further. After bringing them here, he left. Only Huaishir and Russell were left standing in front of the door. "So, you refused the Emperor's help and wanted him to release your friend?" Huaishir asked in confusion. "The Emperor's uncle?" "Yes, he is one of the adopted sons of Titus' grandfather, Aulus, and the one with the highest achievements. If it weren't for his refusal, Aulus would have even considered including him in the category of successors. He alone is better than thousands of soldiers and horses." Huaishir. Recalling his old friend in the Utopia, Russell could not help but smile. Marcus Sicinius Fronto Aulus. He was once an indispensable member of the Utopia. He was knowledgeable, elegant, and handsome. What was even rarer was that he was reliable and reassuring. He was a real prince. To be honest, there was a time when young girls' eyes turned red when they saw him. Unfortunately, he got married early. After his wife died of illness, he did not remarry. He devoted all his energy to his work and remained single until now. His loyalty is admirable. "What does he do?" Huaishir asked. "A sublimator? An alchemist? Or a scholar?" "Neither. He is the best diplomat." The former spokesperson of the Utopia, Russell, said solemnly. "There is no one more suitable for that position than him. Thanks to his existence and protection, the celestial genealogy's many interests in the present realm and inferno were recognized and guaranteed. The friction, negotiations, and visits between genealogies were all his domain. Even the war between the two rulers, Eve Lit and Leviathan, was mediated by him. Unlike me, who only knows how to talk, he is a person who can gain the trust and respect of his opponents. No matter where he goes, even in the domain of a withered king, he is the most distinguished guest." Huaishir was already ashamed of his inferiority before he heard the whole story. "So, this is the gap between the realms. At best, I'm just selling my body, but the other party has already built up his reputation and has connections in both the present realm and inferno. Isn't he a combination of Ban Shao and Wang Xuanzi?" Huaishir asked. Russell thought for a moment and nodded. "Then you have to add Richelieu and Talleyrand." Huaishir had never seen anyone who could earn such respect from Russell, but because of this, he became more and more puzzled. If he's so powerful, why is he hidden here? Does he know too much? Russell's footsteps paused. He wanted to say something, but stopped. There was the sound of the door being pushed open. Just as the two of them were talking, the old man who was organizing the books in a library heard the noise outside and pushed the door open. When he saw the two of them, he was stunned. Russell? His slightly weathered face was not as old as Russell's, but looked like he was only in his 40s. His dark eyes were filled with a gentle light, without any hesitation. Only his white waist-length hair revealed his long age. Even if he was simply wearing a white robe, he gave off an indescribable feeling of nobility. It was a graceful bearing that Huaishir did not have, but his expression was not arrogant, but elegant and gentle, which made people feel good about him. Seeing the visitors standing in the courtyard, the old man, who had lived in seclusion for a long time, was not filled with disgust and displeasure like his other companions. On the contrary, he did not hide his surprise and joy. On the contrary, Russell's expression was complicated, and he sighed, "Long time no see, Marcus." Marcus did not even care about the ancient scroll in his hand. He threw it aside, walked up with a big smile, opened his arms, and hugged him tightly. "Long time no see, Russell, how have you been?" Russell, Huaishir, no one responded, only an awkward silence. The scene of an old friend reuniting was obviously so touching, but the problem was, Huaishir could not understand why the old man was hugging him. Chapter 954. Huaishir was dumbfounded. feeling Marcus' warm embrace. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. He looked at Russell with eyes full of confusion. What the hell? What's going on? It's a long story. Russell pressed his forehead and sighed helplessly. After a long time, Marcus finally let go of his embrace. But before Huaishur could react, he held Huaishur's hand again, as if afraid that he was an illusion that would disappear at any time. Unbelievable. Russell, you become a lot younger, he said in shock. Even your race has changed. Huaishur didn't know how to answer. Marcus seemed to have finally understood something. He took a step back, looked at Huaishur, and then looked at Russell next to Huaishur. So that's how it is, he exclaimed in surprise. You actually secretly went for plastic surgery? You even brought a doctor over to introduce him to me? Quick, doctor, give me one that's exactly the same as him. Mr. Marcus, he is not a doctor. Then is it your father? Your father, my ass. Huaishur was angry. My father died many years ago. Marcus nodded in understanding. That's right, you told me that your mother died young, ahem. After coughing twice, Russell stepped forward and said seriously, Marcus, we came here for an important matter. You don't have to say anything. I already understand. Marcus interrupted him and muttered to himself. I can already feel it. Huaishur wanted to take advantage of his muttering to himself to withdraw his hand, but that hand suddenly stretched out and grabbed his wrist again. It was so strong, like an iron clamp. It's war, Marcus murmured. His dark pupils seemed to be burning with fire. The smell of war. Yes, you're planning a war, Russell. I know, a war of life and death. I knew it. This time has finally come. He shouted excitedly. The end of paradise is here. Huaishur was at a loss. He didn't know what he was talking about. Ahem, Marcus, that the war plan against the ranchers has been canceled. Russell reminded in a low voice. That plan has been rejected for many years because of insufficient budget, excessive demands, and no possibility. Who dares? Marcus suddenly turned around and stared at him. It's the directorate, right? I knew it was those bastards. And those good-for-nothings from the Continuation Institute. In a long silence, Huaishur turned to look at Russell. His small eyes were big confused. You call this gentle and refined. Do you have some misunderstanding about the Doomsday language? Marcus, calm down, calm down. If it's not the plan to conquer paradise, then it's the Green Sun sequence? Marcus asked. The development of Hell's borders is about to be realized. Although the Green Sun has been realized, the development of Hell's borders is still far away. Marcus pondered for a moment and came to a realization again. Could it be that the Golden Dawn project to explore the origin of the abyss is finally about to start? In a sense, but it's not this either. It can't be the descent of heaven, right? Heaven has been gone for so many years, it can't even descend, my friend. Russell sighed. The land of dreams in the data center has sunk into hell. How dare you? Marcus roared, the veins on his face bulging, unable to restrain his anger. This is a great humiliation. Russell, call Vitali and Orton. Let's burn those rebels to ashes. With that, he pulled Huaishur and rushed out a few steps, but Huaishur didn't move. Soon the old man turned back and looked at them angrily. What are you standing there for? Let's go. Vitali and Orton are dead. Marcus, isn't this the obituary you posted yourself? Russell looked at him with pity. The kingdom of heaven no longer exists. All of our grand plans and hopes have vanished without a trace. They have fallen along with our ideals. It's been 70 years. How long are you going to be immersed in this dream? Marcus was stunned on the spot for a long time, as if he couldn't understand what he said. He was like a lost child. He couldn't find the direction, but he could no longer escape reality. If they're all gone, he asked blankly, but where should I go? Russell was silent and didn't answer. Where are you? Russell? Are you Russell? Are you also a figment of my imagination? Just like the past, Marcus muttered blankly. Am I having a relapse again? I'm sorry, I miss you guys. I really miss you guys. He lowered his head, tears already streaming down his face. But I already have nowhere to go. Please tell me, where's my home? It's not an illusion this time. Russell pressed his shoulder and told him seriously, I'm right in front of you, Marcus. I'm here to bring you back." The man covered his face and cried silently. Huaisher looked away, unable to bear to look anymore. After a long time, when Marcus finally calmed down, he seemed to have turned into a wooden man. He sat on a chair in a daze, silent and silent. It was as if he had lost his soul. "What's wrong with him?" Huaisher stood in the distance, looking at the lonely figure, and asked softly, "Is he crazy?" It was impossible to imagine how much of an impact the fall of Utopia had on him. It had actually caused a sublimator to fall into madness, causing the wise and elegant diplomat of the past to become like this. "Yes, he's crazy." Russell lowered his head and smoked a cigarette. "After all, he's a Roman. It's not strange that he often has seizures. Have you not seen a lot of crazy Roman royalty?" Huaisher was speechless. This was also a strange rumor that had spread throughout the modern land. Among the emperors of Rome, there was no lack of prominent monarchs and wise people, but there were few exceptions. The more prominent, the wiser, and the more far-sighted they were, the more muddle-headed and tyrannical they would be in their later years. No, it could almost be said that they were crazy. It was fine if they were extremely extravagant, but a few emperors directly set off civil strife and war, pushing Rome to the verge of collapse several times. It was hard to imagine how such coincidences gathered together, almost forming an unwritten tradition. If it was a bloodline defect, it could not be explained. After all, the most important thing in Rome was the throne, but it did not necessarily have to be passed down by bloodline. Several emperors were even slaves or curfersed, but once they sat on that throne, they would not have a good ending at all. In the past, the emperors were poisoned to death, assassinated, and died of diseases countless times. As for the descendants and relatives of the emperors, there were so many that it was uncountable. "Should I say that power makes people crazy?" he asked curiously. "No, this is a curse, Huaisher," Russell said. "The curse of the throne, the weight of the crown, the price of becoming the supreme. In Rome, before the emperors ascended the throne, they would be endowed with the stigmata and miracles of god Jupiter, becoming the master of the Roman genealogy. And at the moment of ascension, he would naturally become the crowned one and inherit the correction value accumulated by all the Roman emperors throughout history. A person, regardless of whether he was an ascender before or not, after going through such a ceremony, would become one of the strongest in the entire modern land. The memories of the emperors of the past, the essence and experience of countless struggles would be available for him to integrate and master. And after 1,000 years, the correction value of Rome had reached more than 300%. This power, coupled with the miraculous engravings and the relics of authority, could already be called a demi-human and demigod. This was not a secret among the upper echelons of the major genealogies, but it was the first time Huaisher learned about it. He was shocked and puzzled. More importantly, since he was so strong, what curse could threaten the emperor? "Isn't it only Rome that can destroy Rome?" Russell replied. "There is no such thing as a free lunch in this world, Huaisher. In addition to inheriting all the correction values, he will also bear the distortion of the entire genealogy in Rome. This is the responsibility of the emperor. One hand held the strongest power in the world, and the other hand held a terrible curse that could poison the whole world. For ordinary people, facing one of them was unbearable, let alone facing both. The moment the emperor put on the crown, his life would enter a countdown. In a long time, until his life, soul, and will were exhausted, he could no longer bear the burden. The pressure brought about by this power and the curse is too great, and it will even spread to the family. The so-called madness is only the best outcome. Even if it is not blood-related, as long as there is a familial connection, it is absolutely impossible to get rid of it. What do you think the imperial guards who accompany the emperor do? Is it to protect the strongest emperor in the world? No, it is to protect Rome. If the Senate determines that the emperor has fallen into madness, then the imperial guards are responsible for cutting off the emperor's head to put an end to the solidification and the spread of the disaster. If the emperor confirms that his kin is incurable, then he will have to kill him personally. Marcus being allowed to live until now is already the limit of what Titus can do, apart from the many people who have received his kindness. Because of the stimulation of the fall of the kingdom of heaven, he lost control? Maybe, or maybe he is disappointed in us, so he has nowhere to go. Russell sighed. In the past, all of us thought he would be different. It was because he was too steady and gentle, making people like him and trust him. He also successfully created a false impression, an illusion that he is very strong. Uncle, he is indeed very strong. The person who spoke was the emperor who had returned. Unknowingly, he had been standing outside the courtyard, quietly looking at the man's back, but he did not step forward. When I was very young, I knew that he was different from the others. Titus turned back and said, "In the palace of Rome, Uncle has always been an anomaly. He is not obsessed with pleasure, does not pursue extravagance, and has never indulged his desires. Without his teachings, I would not be who I am today." He paused and said indifferently, "Russell, it is your fault that he became like this." "Yes." Russell nodded and did not shirk the responsibility. "You have seen him, so you should understand that he is no longer useful and has no value." Titus asked again, "Do you still insist on your original idea?" "Yes." Russell responded solemnly. "If he is not there, the reconstruction of celestial genealogy is meaningless. That is his home, your majesty, the home he chose for himself." "Then take him back." Titus was silent for a long time and said softly, "He is my teacher and my most respected elder. If he wants to go home, I cannot stop him. He is very old, Russell. Dementia, madness, amnesia, and unclear consciousness. He does not even remember me, his nephew, but he still remembers you. I will not ask you how to make him realize his value, nor do I intend to ask you to build a meticulous nursing home for him. I only hope that all his sacrifices can be meaningful. His death can be valuable." "It must be so." Russell nodded solemnly. So, in the silence of parting, the emperor walked to the old man's side, bent down, held his hand, kissed his cheek for the last time, and hugged him. "Uncle, you can go home." He said goodbye softly. "I will miss you." Marcus was sluggish for a long time, as if he understood something, and smiled happily. Titus was silent, gave him a final hug, and turned away. He never looked back. Chapter 955. When Huaishur and the others returned from the sky courtyard, there was another person in the team. In a wheelchair, pushed by Anna, the curious old man kept looking around. He had no idea where he was going. Occasionally, he would mumble and repeat what Russell told him. Go home. Huaishur carried a bag of luggage for him, and the rest of the items would be sent directly to the ivory tower by Rome. When he stood on the airport runway again, he couldn't help but feel emotional. After such a short journey and so many experiences, he actually felt a little tired. Where are we going next? Russell didn't answer. He just looked down at the message that popped up on his phone. After a long time, he slowly raised his head with a strange expression. Unfortunately, your journey is temporarily over, Huaishur. It's over? Huaishur confirmed it again and again, but he still couldn't understand. What does this mean? Originally, he was prepared to be taken to the pit by this guy and be used as a tool again, but there was no result yet. Why did it suddenly end without any beginning or end? He had seen the beginning, but he didn't let him see the ending. Wasn't this a bit too much? Even if it was a road movie, the audience would have to refund their tickets. Can't help it. There are always accidents. Russell was helpless. I want to take you to Egypt at the end and see if I could get lucky and ask the pharaoh to give you a prophecy, but now it seems like you won't have that kind of luck. He said, I'll take Marcus with me. You have other work to do. Wait, you don't plan to go to Doomsday? Huaishur said that if he passed by Xinhai, he would go to the Special Affairs Department to cause trouble for his good brother, Old Fu. How come his happy plot was gone? Doomsday? Doomsday is the least of our worries. Russell laughed and pointed to Huaishur. Their answer is you, right? Let's not talk about Xin Yao support. Chu Hai's son, the next leader of the Social Security Bureau, and Lady Lotus are also training you. The Yuan clan and the Lin clan even took the initiative to bet on you. Furthermore, the Dombwa School District had already completed a deep cooperation with Dongxia. Everyone already had common interests. As long as you exist, Eastern Summer's attitude will not change. Huaishir was dumbfounded for a long time. Following this logic, he suddenly realized that he seemed to have become the bridge between Dongxia and celestial genealogy. Could this also be the foresight of the mystic bird? He was horrified. In hindsight, that might be the case, but doesn't the Eastern Summer's Xin Yao like to guide newcomers? It's beneficial but not costly, and the benefits are endless. Moreover, the Eye of Life isn't just for show. Even if it can only look at the big picture, it should be able to see your potential. Seizing the opportunity to make a wave of angel investments is simply a sure win. When Russell said this, he immediately became enraptured. You should also pay attention. In the future, if you meet any potential ascenders, just give them something. If you don't have anything on hand, just give them a letter of acceptance from our university. It's better than money. Just a few years in college will give you a lifetime of benefits. Wow, isn't this too utilitarian? Huaishir was shocked by the darkness of the adult world. Bullsh asterisk T, this is called timely help. Okay. Russell rolled his eyes at him. But from what I see, you're quite good at this. I don't need to remind you. I'm just telling you that as the secretary of the principal's office, you can sign the acceptance letter as you wish. As for how to use it, it's up to you. It doesn't matter whether you burn it for fun or send it to children. Huaishir was suspicious. Aren't you afraid that I'll mess around? Will you? Russell asked back, leaving Huaishir speechless. See, Huaishir, Russell smiled proudly. Your sense of responsibility is stronger than you think, much stronger. Perhaps your parents have set a bad example for you, causing you to overdo it. But after all, a person's energy is limited. Sometimes, appropriate coldness and ruthlessness is also one of the survival philosophies of adults. He said, before loving others, you should love yourself more. What is this? Huaishir asked unhappily. A parting message? It doesn't matter if it's not worth mentioning. Russell shook his head and sat on the steps next to the track. He didn't care about his custom-made suit pants. When he rolled up his sleeves, he smoked a cigar and lazily basked in the sun. It was like a bear climbing out of a tree hole after the end of winter. The skinny man sighed with envy at the spring in front of him. Actually, I've been thinking, he said, about what I should teach you. Didn't you teach a lot? Negotiation and decision-making? That's not the point. At best, it's just a little trick to kill time. It's not really important. Russell shook his head. As your teacher, as a former preparatory recorder, Huaishir, I should teach you something. I should teach you something really useful and valuable, but I don't know how to do it. Russell spread out his hands and shook his head in self-mockery. Everything I've learned and prepared in my entire life, I don't even have the chance to show it off. I've never tested it myself, so how can I teach it to others? I have a lot of schemes, ambitions, and delusions, but you won't be interested. I can teach you how to be a good principal, how to control the budget and cost, how to expand the business and win people's hearts. But I'm afraid you won't be satisfied. After thinking about it, I can only take you out to see the world and introduce you to my old friend one by one. I hope your future will be smoother. I thought I would be firm and without hesitation. But as I walked, compared to the achievements of others, I began to feel ashamed and worried about gains and losses. I was afraid that I would encounter some problems that I couldn't solve and lose face in front of my students as a teacher. Huaishir shook his head. Doesn't everyone respect you? Even the Emperor of Rome treated you with courtesy. No, that's not respect. That's politeness, Huaishir. Russell smoked and replied calmly. Respect is for the noble, so they left it to the former utopia. But politeness is different. They are so polite because they don't care. But it's natural for them to not care. This is very rational because this is the current situation of celestial genealogy. After discarding the past glory, a declining organization, a divided genealogy, and an unremarkable second-rate organization. After many years, pain and achievements have gradually withered, and they can only clean up the mess in such a sorry state. Wash blood with blood. A hoarse roar suddenly sounded. In the wheelchair, the old man who was holding the coffee cup suddenly widened his eyes. The coffee cup in his hand was crushed, and the hot liquid flowed down his fingers to his blanket, leaving a trail of rising flames. In the sudden fury, the dull old man roared at the air with all his might. Traitors will eventually die of blood loss. Weisher was stunned. Russell, on the other hand, chuckled softly. He stepped forward, pried open Marcus' fingers, and took out the coffee shards. After wiping away the stains, he changed the blanket for him and covered it again. Look, you've said too many discouraging words. Even a senile old man can't stand it anymore. He patted his old friend on the shoulder. Don't worry, Marcus. We're still alive. There's still a long way to go. Rome wasn't built in a day. Gradually, the struggling old man in the wheelchair finally calmed down and returned to the form of a clay sculpture. Were we just now? Russell asked. Weisher thought for a moment. Clean up the mess. Yes, clean up the mess. Russell took out a handkerchief, wiped his fingers, and told him calmly, this is what we need to do now, and it's also the next priority. That's why I have to remind you of the danger. He said, now you're already a signboard of heavenly state. After meeting so many people with me, you'll only be more conspicuous. Many people don't want us to continue to exist, but I run away quickly when I encounter trouble. They can't do anything to me. Therefore, they may target you next. You represent not only yourself, but also the future of celestial genealogy. Whether it was Weisher's existence or the Book of Destiny, to celestial genealogy, they were indispensable. They were even more important than everyone imagined. Isn't this all your fault? Weisher glanced at him. How can you persuade people to pay attention to their safety after pushing them to the teeth of the storm? Do you regret it? No, I don't intend to jump ship. Weisher thought for a moment and smiled helplessly. It's just that the pressure is a bit too much. In the future, won't I have to pay attention to my appearance when eating and sleeping to prevent others from secretly taking photos? No, it's the opposite. Russell shook his head and told him, you need to live more realistically, Weisher. If you want to cry, cry. If you want to laugh, laugh. Throw the so-called burden of being an idol to the back of your mind. If you're angry, be furious. If you pity, be merciful. Ignore other people's words. You don't even need to humbly accept them on the surface. If you decide that something is necessary, then go ahead and do it. Ignore everything that stands in your way. There was a long silence. Weisher couldn't understand. If you go against the flow like this, you'll be finished sooner or later, right? Listen carefully, Weisher. There are two kinds of leaders. Russell raised two fingers. One is to lead the confused to unite and move forward. The other is to represent and incarnate everyone. The former requires authority and strategy, shrewdness and ambition, and even the necessary tricks and deceit. The latter is simple and more difficult. It only requires everyone to trust without reservation and doubt. You're born to be the latter. You have to stand at the highest point, like the sun, and let all the people who yearn for you gather to you. Maybe you have doubts about your future, but I can tell you responsibly that it's not fate that chose you. It's you who chose fate. Russell pressed his shoulder and told him word by word, why sure, this is the only thing I can do for you as a teacher. If the Republic must have a savior, why must it be you? He said, you just need to be yourself because your fate belongs to you. Weisher was stunned. It was the first time he had heard such solemn words from Russell. He felt a little dreamy, but for some reason, he felt much more relaxed. It was as if he had suddenly been freed from the huge shadow of the future. It was as if he had been relieved of a burden. Hearing you say that, I suddenly want to quit. Weisher sighed. Wouldn't it be better to go home and be a salted fish? That doesn't matter. In this day and age, heroes compete for positions. Russell glanced at him indifferently. Can't we save the world without you? Come on, do you think I don't know you? Weisher lowered his head and smiled. He stretched out his hand. After saying so much, where's the arrangement? I'm done with the chicken blood. Where's 007's mission target? I like students like you. You can always understand what the teacher means. Russell smiled. The job this time is very simple, Why, sure. When he said this, his smile made people feel cold all over. There was a hidden ferocity. After ending your own journey, you're going to end another person's journey. There was a person whose life was full of pain. He needed a little help. After getting tired of his poor life, he needed a kind person to help him get rid of all this. Forever. Chapter 956. 3 hours ago, in Iceland, the morning had just passed, and the slightly cold wind blew from the distant mountains, and the birds on the branches flew into the air. In the town, the door of the fast food restaurant was pushed open, making a jingling sound. The boss at the counter looked up, pushed his glasses, and saw a familiar customer. Outside the door, in the light rain, the man with the round-framed, tortoise-shell glasses put away his umbrella and put it on the shelf. After stepping on the cushion, he walked in and sat beside the bar. After taking off his hat, his gray hair was revealed. "Good morning, Mr. Liu." The boss with the coffee pot came up and poured him a cup of steaming coffee to dispel the chill. "What do you want today, the usual?" "Yes, another pack of toast." "Take it away." The man called Mr. Liu was slightly old, but his specific age could not be seen. He just held a coffee cup and took a sip, waiting quietly. In this town, many residents were familiar with each other. When they saw him walk in, they greeted him warmly, and he responded gently one by one. Soon, the boss, who returned from the kitchen, put down the plate and packed toast. He was not in a hurry to get busy. In the old jazz song of the jukebox, he chatted casually with Mr. Liu. Anyway, business was leisurely. "It's rare. I've never seen you order toast before." The old boss leaned on the counter and asked curiously, "Why? Do you want to try a new taste?" "Yes." Mr. Liu nodded. Life is long. There has to be some new fun. When eating, he was always in a hurry. It was obviously an ordinary fish and chips set, but he still held a knife and fork and ate calmly. There was a kind of gentle beauty. Unlike others, he did not look at his phone when eating, nor did he pay attention to the picture on the TV. He just focused on eating as if there was a delicious meal in front of him that deserved to be treated seriously. "What day is it today?" After finally putting down the knife and fork, he looked at the strings of colorful lights that were about to be hung in the corner of the shop and asked curiously, "Is it Christmas?" "No, it's still early." The boss smiled and sighed softly. "It's just celebrating the 30th anniversary of the opening of the shop. It's not a big deal." 30th anniversary? So soon? Mr. Liu nodded slightly and understood. "So, I've been here for more than 30 years. How's Peter? I heard that he just got married a few days ago." "That's right. Living in a big city like London isn't far away, but I don't have much time to come back either. After a few months, when I have a child, I may come back even later." "When are you retiring?" Mr. Liu sipped his coffee slowly. "You're getting old, aren't you? It's about time for someone new to come." The shopkeeper's expression froze for a moment, and he didn't say anything. He seemed to be lost in thought as he looked at the light rain outside the window. The shop gradually quieted down. Soon, there was a vibration on the table. The phone screen next to the coffee cup suddenly lit up, and an unfamiliar phone number popped up. But Mr. Liu did not seem to be in a hurry to pick up the phone. He just drank his coffee quietly. The screen dimmed and lit up, then dimmed again. What was strange was that the number displayed was a jumbled mess, constantly changing. "There's a call," the store manager said. "There's no rush. Let's wait for a while." Mr. Liu stared at the reflection in the coffee cup and said softly, "I still want to be quiet for a while. I'm afraid there won't be such a quiet and leisurely life in the future." He said, "Wait for me to finish drinking. Then take your time." The shopkeeper nodded, wiped his hands on his apron, and walked in the direction of the kitchen. His footsteps were hurried. However, after turning around, he heard the sound of someone falling to the ground behind him. He stiffened on the spot. Under his apron, he gripped the heavy handle of his pistol tightly. Soon, the shop, which was not very spacious, returned to silence again. There was only the hoarse and damaged melody of the gramophone. Finally, the shopkeeper slowly turned around and stared at the man sitting next to the counter drinking coffee. "There's no need to do this," he said. "It's been 30 years, Liu Baiyan. Why do you have to do this?" It's been 70 years. Liu Baiyin calmly corrected him. Before I came here, I served 9 years in prison. Then, I lived in London for more than 30 years. It rained every day, and I went back and forth every week. I wore a tracking ring on my leg, and I lived in a specific area. Inspectors would come to visit me at random times. I was like an ornamental animal living in a cheap motel. Later, someone thought I was old, so they let me come here. I went from an ornamental animal to a wild animal. Actually, it's all the same. It's just that I can't see the cage anymore. That chain is still around my neck, and it's been with me for 70 years until today. Behind him, the residents who had fallen to the ground no longer made sound. Only countless purple capillaries appeared on their faces, quickly turning into wax. In a few people's hands, their pistols and alarms fell to the ground, and clumps of mold grew on them. The origin substances that spread out were poisonous, causing strange colors to appear on the floor, table, and sofa. They spread rapidly, like a bucket of paint that had been knocked over. The store manager took a step back and subconsciously pinched his collar. There's no need to contact the surveillance team. Liu Baiyin said, before I came here, I already went there. He thought for a moment, then said softly, before I came here, I went to a lot of places. Outside the window, the cold and cheerless town was bathed in the rain. There was no longer any sound. The once noisy road was deathly still. Only the store manager's suppressed breathing could be heard. Are you crazy? He pressed down on the pistol, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. You should know that you can't escape. Even if you can live, the rest of your life won't be good. It's the same as staying here. It's all in hell. There's no difference. Liu Baiyin put down the cup in his hand and picked up the phone that was vibrating endlessly. The time has come. Old friend, we have to say goodbye. Bang! The loud sound of parting burst forth, one after another. Bloody holes appeared on Liu Baiyin's body one after another, but no blood flowed out. It was as if they had all been drained long ago. And in his hand, the phone finally connected. However, no sound came from the other side. In that instant, the store manager took a step back in fright. He finally sensed the slender figure that had appeared beside him at some unknown time. It was a teenager. He had a face that was very similar to his son's when he was young, but his eyes and hair were black. There was a happy smile at the corner of his mouth. The child sat on the bar counter and stared at the scene happily. Finally, he looked at Liu Baiyin. It seems that I came a bad time. It doesn't matter. Liu Baiyin took a last look at the broken porcelain cup on the table and said, I just want to finish this cup of coffee. Are you so reluctant to leave, Liu Baiyin? The Roman teenager laughed heartily. Then why don't you stay in this happy nest? Wait for Russell to come to your door and deliver the late liquidation and trial. But do you care about this kind of thing? Actually, I'm not afraid of the trial. Liu Baiyin stroked the sharp stubble of the coffee cup, feeling the slight tingling. I'm more afraid that no one will come to me, he said. I'm afraid that they will forget me. No one responded. Only the sharp porcelain shard pierced his index finger, bringing the lonely pain of the forgotten. On the floor behind the counter, the store manager, who was convulsing in pain, raised his head with difficulty and pressed the fatal switch. There was a cracking sound from Liu Baiyin's body. A faint blue flame was ignited under the skeleton. It quickly rose and spread, covering the old body and engulfing it. It was burned to ashes. However, on the skeleton that was gradually turning to ashes, an ancient jade crown emerged. It was like an ancient cultural relic that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. It had not changed color in the burning fire and glowed faintly. Then, on the skeleton, flesh and blood grew again, and a brand new face appeared. It was just like returning to youth. With the blessing of the crown, he shed the cocoon that he had woven for 70 years. His strong body was reborn from the flames. Then, a black shadow rose from under Liu Baiyin's feet. Following the memory and instinct of the past, it formed a solemn suit. How nostalgic. This symbol. Liu Baiyin lowered his head and stared at the Utopia emblem on his chest. He looked at it for a moment and reached out to swipe it away. Thus, there was only a blank space left. Just like that, he broke free from the last shackle. He slowly got up and picked up the packed toast next to him. Finally, he looked around the deathly silent room and said solemnly, "Thank you for accompanying me for so many years. Thank you for the coffee, too." Liu Baiyan wiped the corner of his mouth and said softly, "I'm going on a trip. Everyone, goodbye." He pushed the door open and left. Holding an umbrella, he walked towards the world engulfed by the cold rain. It gradually disappeared. In a silent town, there were only endless black butterflies crawling out from the cold corpses. Under the nourishment of the blood, they were like a surging tide. After a long winter, they spread their wings, which were covered with giant eyes, and rose from this new hell. They welcomed a new life. Scale powder sprinkled down, and the rain of death fell. 3 hours later, in a roaring helicopter, Huaishir had already connected to a conference call. The surveillance video of the fast food restaurant appeared on the screen in his hand. This is a message sent by the school affairs office half an hour ago. In the earpiece, the vice principal introduced, "It has been assessed as a major vicious incident by the decision-making room of the Central Command Bureau." "Who is this?" Huaishir asked. "Liu Baiyan, a former member of the Utopia." Isaac said, "The survivors after the fall of the heavenly state. Now it seems that they have completely surrendered to the Golden Dawn. If you ask me, I should have killed him 70 years ago." "Just because he's a lucky survivor?" Russell asked back. "There's no doubt about it, Isaac. We can't kill someone just because they talked to a member of the Golden Dawn, right? Besides, he's in prison. I can't just rush in and cut his neck, right? Kill, kill, kill." On the other end of the phone, Marcus's voice suddenly sounded as he shouted vaguely, "Burn his whole family. Beat his mother. Traitors must die." Okay, don't choke. Speak slowly. Give me the phone. Give me." There was a mess of voices. "You old fogies are really too much." Isaac suppressed his irritation and continued to explain the details to Huaishir. 70 years ago, he was the only survivor in the core area when the heavenly state fell. Other than him, all his colleagues and students died. Because the relevant experience was vague and inconsistent with other people's reports, he was suspected of colluding with the Golden Dawn and was imprisoned in the Tower of London. In the end, the internal court did not have direct evidence and did not sentence him. After 5 years of imprisonment, he was put under surveillance. Finally, after more than 30 years of investigation, he was allowed to leave London. After that, he lived in a small town in Iceland for 30 years until he killed everyone a few hours ago. Speaking of which, he's your colleague, Russell suddenly interrupted. What do you mean? His stigmata also belongs to the road of Heaven's Inquisition, Russell said. Coincidentally, he's the same as you, Huaishir. Huaishir paused. The same? Yes. Russell said, it's just that his level is higher than yours. In the past, he was regarded as the only ascendant who could possibly become the new East King. Like you, he's the great judge of Heaven's Inquisition. Chapter 9:57. 70 years ago, before the fall of Celestial Kingdom, Liu Baiyan was a ascender in his prime, the leader of the Utopia's logistics and support team, and the great Si Ming who had great expectations and effort poured into him. After the fall of Celestial Kingdom, everything became completely different from the past. The glorious future disappeared without a trace. All the bright wishes were shattered by the cruel reality and ended gloomily. Some people died of depression, some fell into madness, and more survivors were scattered everywhere. Some chose to step into hell and began a journey of no return. There was no contact since then. Among the vast majority of survivors, some were found to be involved with Golden Dawn and were sentenced. There was also another group of people who were imprisoned and put under surveillance. But did he really betray us 70 years ago? Didn't the dossier say that there was no specific information? Huaishir was confused. Could it be that he was locked up for 70 years just because he was suspicious? What else? Russell asked back. He indeed didn't have direct evidence, but I didn't kill him with my own hands. Wasn't he still alive and well after so many years? I even asked someone to plead his innocence back then. Although I did lengthen his sentence a little, didn't he still have life? He was still alive, drinking coffee and watching TV every day. Even if everything he swore to protect was gone, he could still say to others that I was innocent. If you say it's okay, I believe you and I forgive you. But how can you face those who sacrifice themselves? As a former partner, I was already benevolent enough to tolerate him spending his life in a corner. But now you've seen that he chose to repay me in this way. Imagine, why sure, Russell sneered. At this time, when celestial genealogy is about to be reorganized, a traitor waved the flag in such a high-profile manner and defected to Golden Dawn in front of the whole world. What kind of consequences will it cause? It was simply black humor that couldn't be more mocking. When everyone used the last of their strength and tried to fight one last time before they died, a dagger stabbed into their back. It brought about the old pain of division. The abscesses and scars that had once fallen in the past were once again exposed in broad daylight. Thus, the old news that had been silent for many years once again made the headlines. Under the teasing and mocking gazes, the silent collapse. I have a question. Fleischer looked at the map and calculated the scale. From Iceland to Granling, and then to the closest exit of the 3 major blockades. It only takes 4 hours after a level 4 Ascender's source substance transformation. In other words, he should be dead by now. Why is he still leisurely walking in the present? Could it be that he can't get a taxi? This is a performance, why sure. Isaac said, a performance prepared for us by the Golden Dawn. He adjusted the image. Do you see this frame? Pay attention, his hat. The video quickly rewound and finally stopped at the scene of Liu Baiyan burning. A skeleton bathed in flames. There was also the solemn jade crown on his head. The texture and shape made people feel so familiar and intimate. Fleischer couldn't help but move closer and look at it carefully. What is this? National Slayer. Isaac said, the matter of the kingdom of heaven's lineage is like a spirit, engraved by a miracle inherited from the road of heaven's inquisition. That was the national death crown that was snatched away by the Golden Dawn back then. They gave it to Liu Baiyan. Tis TSK. This is just short of a provocation. Fleischer shook his head and sighed. He moved his neck and fingers. I roughly understand. So what do you want me to do? Catch this thing back. No need to go through so much trouble. Isaac suggested. You could do it more thoroughly. How thoroughly? As thoroughly as you want. Russell said, you have to kill him with your own hands, why sure. For the first time, as a teacher, he gave such a straightforward order to his student. He was calm and cold. It can't be anyone else. You have to do it. You have to fulfill your duty as the great Seeming. He said, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the cost. The new blood of celestial genealogy would kill the traitor of celestial genealogy. The new great Seeming would kill the old great Seeming. He would use the back wave to push the front wave to death on the beach. He would use the most straightforward method to prove to the world, to hell, and to the Golden Dawn that this was the determination from the ivory tower. Okay, Fleischer nodded. I know. Maybe there's something else. Fleischer, I know you don't like this kind of work. Russell seemed to smile. He asked even though he knew the answer. Will you be soft-hearted? Is there anyone in this world who thinks that the Sword of Disaster is a good person? Fleischer shook his head. Come on, Russell. I'm not stupid enough to think that there's anything good about being with the Golden Dawn. So don't worry. I'll do it, and I'll do it decisively. It was a scene that he could still dream of after such a long time. Looking back, everything seemed like it was yesterday. The bombing of Dombois, the cluster bombs that fell from the sky, the merciless executioners, hell on earth, blood and fire, and the sky that was burned red. More than that, there were the innocent people who died. There was also the person who stood in hell and laughed loudly. From that moment onwards, no, even before that, when he had witnessed the tragic scene on the astral, they were enemies, and there was no room for negotiation. Russell, if he wants to go to hell, then he will die in front of the gates of hell. Fleischer said, I promise. Very good, Fleischer. Russell smiled with satisfaction. Then go ahead and do it. I'll get the school guards to cooperate with you. The two white doves are on standby. No need. Raymond in front will stay to pilot the helicopter. Huaishur said, I'll choose the rest of the people myself. Okay, everything is up to you. I'll wait for your good news. Just like that, he hung up the phone, full of confidence. It was as if he had already seen the result. The meeting ended, and Huaishur, after a moment of contemplation, took out his mobile phone and dialed Damwa's number. Amidst the roar of the helicopter, he heard a voice from the other end. Little 19? He asked, Are you free? On the other end, the young man was stunned for a moment. He seemed to feel the seriousness in the voice and subconsciously straightened his back. Anytime. Very good. Pack your things and get ready. Yuan will come to you later. In 15 minutes, the Rainbow Bridge of the Astronomy Society will be open to you. He said, It's time to get to work. Okay. The cabin in the woods did not talk nonsense. The phone hung up. Ingzhou Damwa. On the sofa in the living room, the young man who was peeling an apple with his head down did not stop. He carefully peeled off the last bit of apple skin, then divided the apple into several pieces, cut them, and put them into the fruit bowl next to him. He picked up the towel on the coffee table and wiped the saliva of the old man who was watching TV. Take your time, old man. I'm going to work overtime. The girl in the kitchen poked her head out and asked doubtfully, Lin Jun, aren't you going to eat dinner? I have work, Yao Xiang. The cabin in the woods shrugged. I may have to go out. If it's fast, I'll be back in a few days. Do you want me to prepare something for you to eat on the way? The cabin in the woods shook his head and smiled. I ate a lot at noon. It's okay. The teacher will not leave me without food. Then I'll put your portion in the fridge. Yao Xiang warned seriously. You must eat it when you come back, because I'll put double the chili. The cabin in the woods staggered and nodded helplessly. In the end, he did not escape. After a brief goodbye, he picked up the coat on the hanger. When he turned around to leave, he heard a voice behind him. I forgot to bring the thing. The decrepit old man on the recliner said, I didn't bring it all. The cabin in the woods looked back in confusion. Aren't you going out? The old man who was watching a funny variety show slowly chewed an apple. When a man goes out, he should at least bring his sword. Along with his words, the silent, ancient long knife on the knife rack made a ferocious sound. The cabin in the woods was stunned and could not help but be surprised. For me? Okay. The old man raised the corner of his mouth and said jokingly, As long as you dare to take it. Spare me. Feeling the fierce aura brewing in the scabbard, the cabin in the woods stretched out his hand several times as if he was catching a snake. Finally, he carefully grasped the handle and picked it up. Just lend it to me. Thank you, old man. He waved goodbye, turned around, and pushed the door open. When he walked out of the training hall, he saw the car parked outside and Yuan leaning against the car. The Shan Jun in the scabbard growled angrily and competed with the trembling long knife in the cabin in the woods. The cabin in the woods glanced at her, and his eyes stopped on her wrist. Under the cuff, there was a black track extending. It was like a tattoo with solemn lines. Chionyo? The cabin in the woods widened his eyes and sighed. Wow, he gave it to you? Your family is so generous. Yuan glanced at him as if she was looking at a guy who was making a fuss out of nothing. He gave it to me, Yazzie, but I don't want it. I kept it for Ah Zhao. She said, Why? Your family didn't give it to you. The corner of the cabin in the woods twitched. It hit the sore spot. The knife that he had just rented from the old man, the sword saint, was not so nice in an instant. It was not that it was not powerful, but it felt the difference between wild and domesticated. He could not help but burst into tears. It was a fool's dream to expect the elders of the Lin family to keep something good for the younger generation. If there was really something good, not to mention giving it to him, even if he got it, there would be elders who would help him keep it together with the New Year's money. The child was still young. He would think about it when he grew up. Even though the cabin in the woods claimed to be a freeloader, other than the usual gift bag when he left home, he only got a dragon head stick. Comparisons were odious. But he could not let himself be overwhelmed by his junior sister's arrogance. Lin Shurjiu blinked his eyes and found a new way to annoy him. He suddenly smiled. Have you heard? The teacher recruited a new student. It is said that she is from the Russian Federation, Katyusha. I secretly asked someone to look through her photo. She is really slim and beautiful. Hey, do you want to take a look? Yuan turned around and looked at him. But she did not look at his phone, but at his neck calmly. So, the cabin in the woods obediently put away his phone and pretended that nothing had happened. In a long silence, the little hut in the forest rubbed his chin out of boredom. He was eager to try again. Why don't I give you a show of strength? Let the newcomer know the seniority. You can do whatever you want, but the result will not be good. Yuan calmly corrected him. Also, I am the eldest. Bullsh *T. The cabin in the woods was furious. I entered first. Oh, do you want to fight? Yuan suggested. Let's use the old method of our two families. The winner gets to talk. The cabin in the woods rolled his eyes. You don't want to work anymore? It won't take more than a few minutes to beat you. Yuan said honestly. If you don't run around, it might be faster. So, you better not mess around. If anything happens later, remember to stand behind me. That was then, and this is now. The cabin in the woods raised the rented weapon and laughed. I have the sword of the sword saint here. Who dares to be presumptuous in front of me? In his hand, the long saber that was overflowing with hostility instantly withdrew its sharpness and turned into an ordinary antique. He did not give face at all. The corner of the cabin in the woods twitched. He was about to hold the sword and say a few words to establish a bond between them. But then he saw a rainbow light falling from the sky. Then there was a blur in front of his eyes, and a blizzard hit him in the face. He opened his mouth and swallowed a mouthful of snow. He coughed violently. She shuddered in the frosty wind blowing against her face. He only saw a world of ice and snow. Where is this? Chapter 958. The north of Greenland, the closest place to the Arctic Circle. In the snowstorm, the helicopter slowly stopped rotating in front of them. The hatch opened, and Huaishur jumped out, looking at the two of them. Not bad. Good preparation. Oh, teacher, long time no see. Cabin in the woods instinctively rushed up, wanting to hug his thigh and then licking it again and again, relying on his sincerity to maintain the position of the eldest brother. But then he saw the girl coming out from behind Huaishur. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he greeted her with enthusiasm, completely forgetting that he had just suggested a show of strength, and smiled warmly. Together with the new junior sister, he could suppress Yuan's expanding arrogance. It's decided. You must be Anna. Don't be nervous. I'm Cabin in the Woods. Call me Master. Puff. Cabin in the Woods, who opened his arms and was ready to give warmth to his teacher, snorted and narrowly blocked Anna's whip kick without warning. His crotch and heart were cold at the same time. Why does this woman have no morals at all? She's like a mad dog. Teacher, can't you find some normal students? Behind him, the sword of the sword saint was motionless, but it made a sound of schadenfreude. Serves you right. Who is this? Anna looked back at Huaishur. He doesn't smile like a good person. He looks like a bad guy. Can I kill him? I want to tell you no, but I can try. Huaishur folded his arms and leaned against the cabin to watch the fun. You probably won't succeed, and it's very likely that you'll ask for trouble. Try to make more friends. Anya, they're your classmates. They won't hurt you. Huh? I don't think anyone would want to be friends with me. But since you said so, I'll try hard. She put her hands in the pockets of her loose jacket and turned back to smile at the two. My name is Anna. I'm 15 years old. If there's a chance, let's play together. Next time for sure. Cabin in the Woods sighed and waved his hand, already foreseeing his troublesome future. Teacher, do you still remember that we teach classical music? Finally, Anna's eyes finally looked behind her. She saw the figure holding the long box, the calm woman who had been silent from beginning to end. The white wolf and Shanjun's eyes met for a moment. Anna was stunned for a moment and quickly walked closer. She stood on her tiptoes and looked at her face carefully, as if she was sniffing her scent. Her smile became more and more pleasantly surprised. I like you, she said. We are so alike. It was as if he could see a beast sealed in a cage. His desire to fight was suppressed by reason, and he could see part of her essence under her dignified face. He was completely different from the frivolous and casual guy who wandered between the black and white sides. The smell of my own kind. Then let's be friendly, Anna. Yuan reached out and gently touched her hair, as if she was looking at her immature self in the past. You will definitely grow up in the future, just like me. The atmosphere gradually became harmonious. Only the small hut in the forest looked bitterly into the distance in the cold wind. It was as if he could see eldest senior brother's throne growing wings and flying away. After waving goodbye, he got further and further away from him. He was the one who came first. Immediately, the tears in her heart fell like snowflakes, incomparably sorrowful. If he was a beautiful girl, he would not be like this. The only thing he could do now was to play to his advantage as a man and hold on to his teacher's thigh. He would work hard to consolidate his position. And before this guy pounced on him, Huaishir had already coughed twice, interrupting his spell-casting action. Since everyone is familiar with each other, let's talk about the work this time. He asked, "Have you all read the information I sent you?" After getting a unanimous answer, Huaishir nodded with satisfaction. "Very good, then I don't need to waste my saliva." He lowered his head to look at the screen of his phone. After confirming the time, he said, "In another half an hour, a train from Nuke to Sissamith will pass by here. It's loaded with wood, coal, and various goods. Our target is on that train. The destination should be the entrance to hell in the north of Granling." Well, he chose the public transportation method quite arrogantly, and he just needs to put up a sign to tell everyone that I am here. I hope you don't let his efforts go to waste. What about the number of people? The small hut in the forest flipped through the information and asked, "It can't be just one person, right? If it were me, there would be a lot of ambushes. There should be a lot of them, right?" Huaishir thought for a moment and was a little uncertain. After all, they have Golden Dawn behind them, so there should be no shortage of cannon fodder. Anna raised her hand and asked curiously, "What about the passengers?" "There are no passengers," Huaishir replied. "The passengers are all dead, a total of 41 innocent people, 10 minutes after boarding the train. Otherwise, I wouldn't have handed this job to you." His words were so calm, but they made people feel a chill run down their spines. If they joked again, they would be beaten. Anna shrunk her neck obediently and did not speak again. "Then what is our purpose?" Yuan asked. "Sabotage and attack." Huaishir said, "There's no limit to the methods. Just do your best while ensuring your own safety. Kill as many as you can, but if you can't kill even one, then go back and prepare to double your winter vacation homework." The small hut in the forest was silent for a long time and said in disbelief, "Isn't this too vague? Moreover, teacher, you have to consider our ability. That is Golden Dawn. Golden Dawn. What are you afraid of?" "When I was your age, I had seen several destructive elements. Don't be nervous and don't feel pressured. Just do your best." Huaishir pulled out a folding chair from the cabin, opened it, and sat on it. Just like the head teacher who invigilated the exam at the end of the year, he looked at the dull faces of the students. "This is your final exam. I hope everyone will have a good result." The small hut in the forest was shocked. "What about you, teacher? Take a break. I'm tired after running for so many days." Huaishir yawned, propped up the hanging stove, lit the fire, and took out a bunch of bottles and cans from his bag. "Everyone, do your best. Teacher will treat you to a picnic when you come back later." Life was not easy. Little 19 sighed. It was the teacher's task. What else could he do? Only Anna suddenly turned back after taking 2 steps and remembered the most important thing. "I have another question." That should be your prey, right?" Anna asked curiously. "But what if I kill him? Won't you be very disappointed?" Huaishir laughed. He was full of expectations. Generation after generation. Isn't that better? Just like that, he watched the students go away. Huaishir sat next to the burning fire, lazily warming himself, staring at the mountains in the distance. "By the way, aren't you worried at all?" Soon, another folding chair was propped up next to the fire, and Raymond, who was checking the equipment in the cabin, came out. He picked up the boiling water in the hanging stove and began to make coffee. Those are your students, right? You just sent them out like cannon fodder. What if they die? Why don't you worry about something useful, such as whether you will have a share in the picnic in the afternoon? Fleischer leaned on the chair calmly and narrowed his eyes. I am still alive as a teacher. How can my students die? This was actually the least of his worries. If it were someone else, Fleischer might have some scruples and rush to the front. But when it came to his own students, he could give them all his trust. That was his work. Apart from the cello, it was one of his proudest achievements now and in the future. They had talent and potential, and they should show it. When the time came, as a teacher, he had to give them this opportunity. Besides, it's going to be winter vacation soon, right? He said softly, I have to let the children get a certificate so that they can go home for the new year. Just like that, in the long silence, only the distant sound of the storm and snow falling could be heard. Fleischer listened to the melody in his headphones and hummed in a low voice. He could feel the rapidly approaching aura. Between the mountain ridges, the railway snaked through the snow like a black rope. It gradually tightened, one end connected to the other end, and the other end connected to the other. They slowly drew each other closer. Hatred, killing intent, and even pain slowly brewed in the silence of the falling snow. He opened his mouth, exhaled white gas, and narrowed his eyes. He waited quietly. The exam was about to begin. On the roaring train, the empty passenger compartment was already a mess. Under the continuous chewing, the blood splattered on the carriage slowly flowed down, freezing on the ice-cold window, leaving behind a series of ghastly red frozen marks. Amidst the muffled chanting, the mutated dogs crawled out of the broken corpses one after another, and soon participated in the process of Tautai. Among the corpses, a fanatic in a gray robe with blood on his bare hands was fanatically painting the floor and the carriage with hymns and scenes from the abyss. Hoarse and pious praises sounded continuously. When the fanatic's prayer finally ended, he turned around, revealing a face covered in scars. Like a tattoo, densely packed words wrapped around his exposed skin in circles. But it didn't look like a colorful depiction. Instead, it was like a gap cut by a sharp blade, just a scar that tore the body. Under the gap, there was no flesh and blood, only a surging darkness and an empty shell. In the darkness, there seemed to be a huge structure slowly operating, faintly revealing a maddening outline and structure. But soon, it quickly became completely different. If one stared at it for a long time, one's soul would be sucked into it and become part of the hideous darkness. It was the projection of the enemy of all human intelligence, Apocalypse Boishuan. The blessings from the demonic nature of chaos occupied this body, allowing him to be close to the source of the abyss at all times, becoming the embodiment of hell. The Great Spirit has known and has bestowed a gift. The officiant called Tattooed Face turned around and said, "Ha ha, that kind of sticky thing. How strange." The armored man who watched the whole process held his chin and grinned. He turned around and asked, "In this case, is it enough to attract attention? Do your old friends like such a gift?" "It's not necessary at all." In the seat next to the window, Liu Baiyin answered coldly. He carefully folded the wrapping paper of the finished toast into a small square and pressed it under the cup. Then he slowly raised his head, looked to the side, and said mockingly, "You guys have also fallen badly. Since when did they start taking this kind of trash?" Chapter 959. It's fine as long as it's useful. The man named Yezi leaned back in his chair and read a book. Without raising his head, he said, "Golden Dawn isn't a penitentiary." "Then what is it?" Liu Baiyin asked. "Destroying heaven, causing the fall of utopia, and stirring up trouble in hell for so many years. What is it for?" "Of course it's to destroy this world." After Yezi clipped the bookmark, he closed the poetry book in his hand and calmly replied, "It literally means that every person, every place with people, and every person's achievements and works will be completely destroyed without leaving a trace." This man, who could be said to be gentle and elegant, was narrating the most brutal words in the world. After a slight pause, he told him meaningfully, "However, before that, some people must face destruction first. All the remnants of Utopia, all those who tried to reorganize celestial genealogy and restore the past, must be destroyed and killed in the most complete way, at all costs." Just like Russell's determination. If the two sides could still barely maintain a little bit of harmony in hell in the past, then now it was the most complete break. In the depths of hell, the two campuses under the jurisdiction of Ramanujan and Madame Chun had already started a fierce war with the rulers. Soon, the ivory tower would also pay the price for its arrogance. At this moment, following Yezi's words, pairs of blood-red eyes slowly opened in the carriage that was supposed to be carrying goods and wood. The sleeping legion was awakened. The solidifiers from the Golden Dawn could feel the killing intent that was gradually approaching. At this moment, a scarlet circle suddenly appeared in the sky. For rays of bloody light circled above the circle, and a small dot appeared in the center of the circle. It was like a sniper rifle aiming at the train from afar. The terrifying power at the border was slowly accumulating. It looked down coldly. Dragon Summoning Flute. This was the true war form of the Dragon Summoning Flute. As the world's largest abyss explorer, it was also the prototype of the ultra-deep Hellstrike weapon that Utopia had assembled on the eve of its fall. But now, it was not in a hurry to deliver a destructive blow. It was just a show of its existence, to declare this indescribable anger to the traitors of the past. "Look, they're looking at us." Yiji chuckled. However, Lu Baiyan remained unmoved. Instead, he looked out the window at the mountains in the distance. It was as if he could feel the resonance between the two wills. He's there, staring at that distant figure through countless dancing snowflakes and gusts of wind. Being able to see the tyrannical light behind the endless storm, his eyes were pierced by that sharp power, and blood vessels appeared. "Is that Russell's son? How dazzling," Lu Baiyan whispered. "Yes," Yiji said. "In the foreseeable future, it will shine brightly." "No, he won't." In that instant, the National Slayer crown appeared above Lu Baiyan's head. After 70 years of silence, the former great Si Ming stared coldly at his descendant, his replacement. The moment they looked at each other, the only thing that emerged from their hearts was the most straightforward and pure determination. He said, "I'm going to kill him." In that instant, on the mountains, the young man beside the bonfire seemed to have heard his words. He smiled calmly. His fingers that were hanging in front of his knees flicked slightly. He sounded the note that lifted the curtain. Therefore, the deviant ghosts crawling on the train raised their burning red eyes, as if they had sensed something, and stared at the raging snowstorm in front of them. In the vast expanse of bleak whiteness, a fleeting shadow suddenly appeared. Along the endless railway track, he was heading straight for the speeding train. Step by step, it moved forward. Under the windbreaker that danced in the snowstorm, the slender hand dragged a heavy sword, cutting through the wind and frost, causing sparks to fly as the iron blade and the frost rubbed against each other. The train roared. Amid the low sound of countless rails hitting each other, a high-pitched whistle burst forth. On the roof of the train, the deviant ghosts with slender limbs like dwarfs began to wriggle. Vague and sharp sounds brewed in their throats. They swallowed their saliva before they hunted, waiting for someone to dare to climb on this train of death. They competed with each other for the position at the front and were ready to pounce. Compared to the speeding train, the fleeting shadow was so slow. But when it took a step, its footprints seemed to shatter the ice and snow, branding the stones and iron under the flying snow. Then, from the sound of the wind, the screams, and the roar of the train, a clear sound suddenly rang out. It sounded like the vibrating strings of a zither. It was the low hum of the sword blade cutting through the flying snow and wind. The mountain lord hissed silently, gnashing its teeth and sucking blood. From the cage, its scarlet eyes stared at the prey in front of it. In the driver's seat, the driver who had turned into a zombie widened his eyes in a daze, feeling the contradiction and conflict between the predetermined order and reality. Right at the front of the track, The person who suddenly appeared raised the heavy sword in his hand and aimed at the speeding train in front of him. Slash! In an instant, a high heat swept over, as if there was lava flowing and gathering on the sword blade, melting all the insignificant flying snow and ice. The sword pierced through the storm, and the moment it broke free from the shackles, it violently destroyed everything in front of it. A violent shock burst out. The terrifying train, full of hell creatures, collided with the sword blade. What was set off was not a loud bang or a roar, but a sad sound of a zither. A Song for the Wanderer. The Song of the Wanderer, a classic that had once been written for the gypsies, was being played from the blade of the sword at this moment. Under the torn hood, Yuan Yuan raised her eyes, and a blazing light burst out from her eyes. The black totems that were originally hidden under the thin clothes were rapidly expanding, spreading, and climbing up her face, making her pretty and quiet cheeks become cold and solemn. The moment the sound of the zither rang out, the divine mark that had been dormant in her bloodline also awakened, causing the originally pitch-black lines to turn crimson. They grew rapidly, even breaking out of her physical body, and the projection of a slender and curved horn appeared on her forehead. Divine mark? Qionyou. A fragment peeled off from the flowing dragon vein in the land of eastern Xia, and crowned as the divine mark formed by the descendants of the dragon. With the never-ending melody of the world and the sound of all things as the carrier, it appeared in the mortal world. At this moment, accompanied by the melody of the sword, a long dragon's roar emerged from the zither's song, shaking the world in front of her and shattering all the insignificant things into dust. The train shook violently, and the terrifying waves spread out. The blazing wind swallowed the flying deviant ghosts, and in an instant they were turned into ashes. And the speeding train was also derailed by this sword. It swerved from its original path and staggered into the rugged ice field, brushing past Yuan Yuan. Starting from the front of the train, a huge crack appeared on the body of the train and quickly spread with the advancement of the sword blade. Like a giant beast whose abdomen had been cut open, a thick and pungent blood gushed out, leaving a red mark that quickly spread across the pale white ice field. Many carriages toppled and rolled, and countless debris flew out from the broken carriages. In the shaking, the tattooed man suddenly raised his hand, and a muffled chant came from behind his cracked face. The originally tilted carriage was suspended in the air by an invisible force and slowly fell to the ground. Outside the carriage, Yuan Yuan raised her hand and pulled off her cumbersome windbreaker, revealing a slim white shirt. Her long hair, tied into a ponytail, fluttered in the snow wind. It was like a flag. "Just take it as a greeting," she asked calmly. "Can you please stop hiding from now on?" In this way, she raised the sword in her hand toward the deviant ghosts and cadaveric dogs climbing out of the countless trains. In the reflection of the sword blade, Mountain King, who had been freed from the shackles, grinned and roared silently. Different from the gentle melody of the past, under the blessing of Qionyou's divine mark, the performance on the sword blade at this moment became vast and magnificent. The illusory emotions in the zither music transformed into real power, and as she rushed forward, the power was tyrannical. In this way, in an instant, she turned into a whistling meteorite, easily breaking the outer shell of the carriage, and broke into the darkness, bringing with her burning flames. Sweeping, leaving a circular trajectory in the darkness, she cut all the opponents in front of her at the waist. But once again, a shrill cry came from a wind. The sword blade was raised, and the steel collided. Outside the broken carriage, the falling light illuminated the attacker. "It's actually a woman." The knight, who was covered in heavy armor, raised his head, holding a halberd and a large shield in his hands, and sneered mockingly. "I didn't expect that such a powerful woman could be cultivated in the present realm." In his hand, the pitch-black shield was once engraved with the symbol of the Eye of Nightmare, but the former emblem had been torn apart and pierced through by a slash. This was the emblem of a betrayer, a former member of the Eye of Nightmare. Many of the solidifiers who pursued power and threw themselves into the abyss. Kumar, who was exiled. Sorry, the main character doesn't seem to have time to deal with you for the time being. He raised his halberd, and Scarlet Eyes mocked. How about playing with me? But you won't mind if there are more people, right? As he spoke, pairs of crimson eyes appeared in the carriage behind him. The armored knights walked out of the darkness. On their blood-stained cloaks, the emblem of the sword cross had long turned pitch black. Their solemn armor was covered in rust. The Knights of the Sacred Heart, who had all fallen in the eastern expedition of hell, reappeared in the world in such an ugly state. Everyone froze, completely crazy from the erosion of the abyss. They had long fallen into monsters. Other than killing and fighting, they had no other pursuits. Come, little girl. Under the helmet, Kumar's scar curved with a sinister smile. I will treat you well. What answered him was the sound of steel. In an instant, she crossed a long distance. Mountain King thrust, like a hot knife through butter. She tore apart his halberd, shield, armor, and even helmet. Then, she skillfully chopped off his head. The corpse fell, and blood spurted out. Yuan stepped over the corpse expressionlessly and walked towards the knights who were advancing like a forest. She only coldly gave her final evaluation. Too much nonsense that you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.